And that's Ron. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Irvington Planning Board meeting of Wednesday, July 2nd, 2024. As you all know, July 4th is Friday. I hope everybody has a safe and happy 4th of July. 249th anniversary. We'll be working on the 250th anniversary as time goes through the year. Introduce everyone. This is Sarah Palermo. She's the gatekeeper on Zoom. There's Ed Barron over here. He's the village building inspector. Doug Hahn, village consultant engineer. Marianne Stessich. Elaine New. Do. I knew I could do that. Laurie Davidowitz, Bill McGillicott, I'm Caesar Manfredi, the chairman, Mike Smith, and Michael Foucault. The June 4th minutes are not ready for approval, so we're going to skip over that. But the May 7th, 2024 minutes.
2025.
Oh, I got 25. I haven't graduated to 25. To 2025, May 7th. We're okay with that, Marianne?
Yeah.
Any issues with the May 7th, 2025? I make a motion to approve the May 7th, 2025 minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Okay. We will now read the order of appearances. Number 1 will be 56 West Clinton Avenue. Number 2 will be 94 Main Street. Number 3 will be 2L Vitero Lane. Number 4, 555 Broadway, Mercy University. Number 5 will be 39 Fargo Lane. And number 6, 76 North Broadway, or Balmer. Number 1.
Good evening. This is Annie Menace from Garrison Foundry regarding 56 Clinton. I will share our screen. We met with you last month. Subsequently, we have met with zoning. Were approved last week. And we have been communicating with Hahn Engineering and received their latest comments. On the revision that we sent through previously, we picked up most of those comments. Just as a refresher, this is the house. It's a historic home here in Irvington. And the goal of the project is to remove the pool and then build a storage shed back here and a covered dining portico, where currently there is an older garage apartment existing on the site. As we discussed with zoning, we are reducing lot coverage and reducing setback variances. Not the setback, we're building within the setback, but we're reducing the size of the structure. And we're here to talk about what we need from planning and pick up where we last discussed. So happy to start where you would like.
Okay, you have Doug Hahn's memo, the technical memo of what you still need to do.
Yeah, so there's looks like we're almost there.
Okay, that's okay.
Okay, this is the latest that we have from him.
Or do you have any comment?
I have nothing.
I have none.
No comment. Nothing from me.
Anything from the public?
Nobody's raising their hand to speak, and there are no comments in the chat.
Okay, Marianne.
Whereas in June 2025, David and Lucy Holiday applied for site development plan approval to demolish an in-ground pool and accessory building and replace them with an accessory structure and reconstruct an existing porch on their house at 56 West Clinton Avenue, which is located in the Villages View Preservation District. And whereas the proposed construction requires variances for coverage, the rear yard setback, and FAR, which the Zoning Board of Appeals granted on June 24th, 2025. And whereas Hahn Engineering reviewed the plans and in a memorandum dated May 30th listed a number of items which were mostly addressed in a subsequent submission. And whereas Suzanne Nolan, the village's landscape consultant, reviewed the plans and made 2 recommendations, which were largely addressed in a subsequent submission. And whereas the planning board held a public hearing on the application on June 4th and July 2nd. And whereas the planning board has determined that the construction will not have any impact on the view of the Hudson River from neighboring properties. And whereas the action is type 2 action under the State Environmental Quality Review Act and therefore requires no environmental review. Now therefore be it resolved, the planning board grants the application for site development plan approval of the improvements reflected in the drawings entitled Holiday Residence prepared by Garrison Foundry, and then the sheets are specified. Subject to complying with the items listed in Han's June 30th, 2025 memorandum and Nolan's June 30th, 2025 memorandum.
Great.
Any questions on the resolution? Make a motion to approve the resolution as read.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Okay, you got the resolution of approval. Thank you very much. And
Thank you very much.
pay attention to the end of that resolution requiring the settling the items in Doug Hahn's memorandum to you.
Yes, absolutely. We will be in discussion with Han Engineering, get that all picked up before we go for our building permit. I believe we have to go to the Architectural Review Board after this. So that's our next step. And then in that window, we're gonna address all of the comments from Han.
Okay. Well, thank
Great.
you very much.
Thank you. All right. Have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Number 2, 2025-04, 94 Main Street. Sarah?
Chris.
Tip his dinner.
Hi,
Evening.
good evening. This is Mitch. And let me see if I can pull up the documents for you here real quickly.
Rich Koch, for the record.
Could you identify your full name and? who
Yes,
you
Mitchell
represent?
Koch, Mitchell Koch Architects. I'm here on behalf of Jason Breen and Allison Stinson for the Bliss Bakehouse at 94 Main Street. And give me half a second here. I'm just going to open the drawings for you. Yes, here we go. Just very briefly, we're back again. It's our hope that we will be able to move this thing forward and be allowed to build out the patio in the back of the bakery, because the work is already underway.
If you get on with the presentation, we'll do just that.
Excellent. So we received some comments from Han, which we've discussed on the phone, and we've addressed. This represents several months of different comments, but essentially the last meeting we were asked by Ed Marin to demonstrate that we were aware of what was in the back patio and what we were going to do to it. And we have done so. And I believe you have all seen the drawings. And let me just rotate this.
But this you're referring to is not up on the screen.
Yes, here we go. I don't, let me see if I can share this with you. I'm sorry about this. I'm not, let me just see, share, there you are. Share, okay, here we go, I'm sorry. And I believe my clients would be there.
I don't, they're not here.
Can
Just
you see
lots
my
of
screen
these.
at this time?
Now,
Now
But
we
you
can.
need to make it bigger.
Zoom in.
I will make it bigger. Apologize for this. I thought we were later. So this is essentially the patio, and the pink area is the area of work. And over the last few iterations and meetings, we have designated where we are going to put a dry well, because unfortunately the roof was drained into the sanitary sewer, which is a no-no. And so we've included a dry well, which is, you can see the drain line has been bubbled. And as you can see in this image, we're showing a clean out where the drain line would change direction. In a discussion with Douglas Hahn, based on comments that we received yesterday after our submittal, we are going to locate a sump there so that we can catch as much of the leaf debris that may end up on the roof and prevent it from going down the line into our dry well, which is located right here. Okay, and there's essentially 3 Caltech chambers located there. I believe everybody's seen that. The other latest item is that there was an existing kind of planted area, a little bit random. You can see the shapes are unusual. And there were some where there were no pavers and some scrubby plantings in this area, which is 30 square feet. In fact, there's some hydrangea and there's a couple other items, and we're proposing to just relocate everything to the back and provide a 50 square foot sort of buffer of plantings at that location. And then our real goal is to build this handicap access and a deck that would allow materials to be brought into the kitchen, which is over here. And so I know you guys have looked at it, and I thank you for your patience, but that's the gist of what we're asking for right now. Okay.
Okay. There's some issues that you need to resolve from an engineering and a drainage point of view and coverage. But it's not, doesn't change too much of what we might approve. So you need to work that out in the.
Absolutely. And this,
drainage.
I talked to Douglas Hahn. We're going to do this and, subsequently, definitely. There's some question of like I say, the sump and the invert location, and we'll give him that information.
May I finish speaking?
Yes, please.
The drainage that currently, the stormwater that currently goes to the sanitary sewer is a county sewer ordinance violation and subject to enforcement. So you are highly encouraged to fix that. Otherwise, it would have to be reported to the county. And there
Can
are
you
serious
repeat that?
issues that have to be straightened out with Ed, the building inspector, on coverage, and with Doug on drainage. But other than that,
Okay.
we're going to move ahead and see if there's any questions.
I have no questions. No questions. No questions.
Sarah?
Nobody's raising their hand to speak and there are no comments in the chat.
Okay, we got a resolution of approval, but pay attention because there are conditions in the resolution that you have to meet. Mary
I'm
Ann?
listening.
Yeah. Whereas in February 2025, Jason Green applied for site development plan approval to construct a deck, ramp, and stairs at the back of his building at 94 Main Street. It's located in the village's View Preservation District, and at which he intends to open a bakery. Whereas the building is a contributing building in the Historic Overlay District, and the proposed improvements constitute demolition as defined in Village Code 22497, and was in March 2025. The Board of Architectural Review approved the demolition, and whereas Han Engineering reviewed the plans and a memorandum dated February 2nd and May 5th listed a number of items, most of which were addressed to Han's satisfaction in subsequent submissions. And whereas the planning board held a public hearing on the application on February 5th, May 7th, and July 2nd, 2025, and whereas proposed improvements will not affect the views of the Hudson from neighboring properties or public rights of way. Type 2 action under secret and therefore requires no environmental review. Now therefore be it resolved, planning board grants the application for site development plan approval of the improvements reflected in the drawings entitled alterations and renovations to Bliss Bakehouse prepared by Mitchell Koch Architects, and the sheets are specified, in patio at 94 Main Street prepared by MKA Studio, and the sheets are designated subject to complying with the items in Han's memorandum dated June 30th, 2025.
Thank you, Mary. Any questions on the resolution?
Okay.
The applicant understands the resolution.
I do.
Make a motion to approve the resolution as read.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You all good, Jason?
Italian bread, remember that.
Pastries.
We got you. Sourdough too. Olive loaf. I got you.
Olive loaf, right? 1, 2, 3. 2025-16, 20 El Retiro Lane. I've been practicing that all week, El Retiro Lane.
Two hours.
Two.
Oh, I forgot the two.
Number 2.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm John Conti from Conti & Conti. On behalf of the owners, can I give you a brief overview of the project as it stands? Sorry, can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, so we're back before you with this project. As you'll remember, it's a proposed, oh, can you all see my screen here?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
Proposed pool cabana, a proposed pool, and a proposed sports court. We had made some modifications previously based on your comments in terms of moving man-made structures out of the aqueduct buffer. And at the most recent zoning board hearing, they approved us for a variance for coverage. And we're back before you, hopefully for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions or give any more color to where the project currently stands.
It was unclear to us whether there's a fence around the sports court.
That's a good question. I don't believe we showed one, but yeah, it's a good question. I think there should be one. I'm not sure if there's one shown in the detail, but yes, we'll have a fence around the sports court.
Okay, and when you come back, you show us the fence. But you need to come back because we asked specifically to do some acoustic remediation to dampen whatever noise that if one uses that court for pickleball. There's concern about the noise carrying to some neighbors. And unless we missed it, we asked for some acoustic mitigation, and I don't see it unless you.
Well, we didn't do any specific mitigation, but we did write some comments back in our reply to Han Engineering regarding how this court was situated, and I could tell you a bit about that. This court is about 10 feet lower than this property line here, so there's like an earthen berm essentially, and then similarly, there's a retaining wall here and the elevation of the proposed building. So, and then on this side here, there's existing vegetation, quite a bit of it. So we haven't done any direct engineering to support that, but I did write some sort of comments and reviewed the material that was submitted. I think it was the first meeting that gentleman submitted stuff, and earthen berms and walls are mentioned there as a way to mitigate sound from this court. So I did write a little bit about that.
Well, I think I'm gonna canvass the board here, but I think you're gonna come back to the fence on that. I think it's okay to go to the ARB just to move this along and come back with the acoustics and the fence. For potential resolution from us. Lori,
What do you ask?
you have any
About the-
thoughts?
Oh, I mean, about the acoustics
Yeah.
specifically. I mean, the berm, I think helps, but yes.
There is no.
Well, I thought
Yeah,
you
it
just
did.
said 10 feet lower than the property line.
Yeah.
Does that help build a berm?
Uh,
A little? I mean, I think there probably could be more mitigation if you utilize the fence and more plantings.
I think they gotta go to the ARB anyway and come back to us. I think.
Yeah.
Han has a bunch of other comments too.
Yeah, the stormwater and drainage
Yeah, there's quite a few comments.
that weren't answered. Okay, I think that's a good point.
I'm also wondering if there's any ground surface, like a cord surface that helps absorb, that's been developed to help absorb. The pinging, the bouncing of the ball. I don't know if that's something that's been developed.
You know, there was another applicant that had an Eagles situation, and they came up with some acoustic panels. I don't know if that's appropriate here, but I think you should consider it. I don't think we're losing too much time. You need to go to the ARB anyway, and what's the scheduling on the timing?
The deadline is ARB, Monday. Once you get a submission.
July 7th.
Yeah, so they can get, and then they come back to us next week,
Yeah, so basically they'll be from the ARB and then next week they'll be here, so
next month.
next month. So yeah, so they won't lose any time.
Yes.
I just want to confirm,
But let me finish with the panel here. Mike?
Just quickly, you mentioned the fence, which I agree with. I saw that Susan Nolan didn't mention anything in reference to plantings. He made mention of the rain garden.
Oh. Did they give us information on the rain garden?
Then we have some, I still need more information. I gotta go through it.
It was S1.
Okay, so there's some blanks that need to be filled,
Yeah,
other than the acoustics.
Suzanne didn't.
Yeah, and that could change a bunch of stuff because it covers the whole, rear yard.
Okay, thanks.
Suzanne didn't have anything, but I remember her saying at the meeting that she thought that more plantings might
Right.
dampen the sound.
Yeah.
I don't think it's in her memo.
Mike Smith,
I have nothing from.
Fuco.
What's the acceptable decibel level in the town code for our neighbors?
Ed, is there a code on decibels?
There is, I think it's 65.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, if pickleball is above that, then I assume there's a way to know if a berm or vegetation will lower it. And I'd like to see that. If the sound of pickleball being hit is above the code, then we have to.
Mike Smith
know
may
it's gonna
have
get
some information.
cool.
on it.
Maybe I can.
Yeah, the pickleball.
I don't think it would be fair to just assume that vegetation will lower it enough.
You need to do some details on this, the sound issue with the potential of pickleball, because it is loud. And there is a neighbor to the north who would have to, listen to it to some extent. And need to do a little more work than paragraphs you may have talked about the elevations. You done, Mike?
Yes.
Do you have anything from the public there?
Nobody's raising their hand to speak, and there are no comments in the chat.
Okay. All right, you were gonna say something there?
yes, I was just gonna, yes, I just wanted to confirm with maybe Mr. Marin or Mr. Hahn, I did respond to the comments received prior to 6:18. I just want to make sure they did receive those because I didn't get any an update on those.
Give us a call in the morning, we'll look at it.
Yeah, I'll have to find out who we sent it to.
Okay, yeah, okay, I'll maybe connect with Sarah tomorrow on that.
Actually,
And then-
connect with Doug on that.
Okay, Doug. And then I did just want to say, I said in the past, I asked the client what he wanted to do with this court, and he said pickleball was not something he planned on playing here. I know it is the size of a pickleball court, but just, so it's known, he said he didn't plan on playing pickleball here.
Did he say what he planned on playing?
No, I didn't ask him. I said, they're concerned with pickleball. Are you planning on playing that? And he said, no.
I know, yeah. Pickleball
Well, it's a little unusual to have a pickleball court on a residential property here. Doesn't make the same. It's much noisier than a tennis court. Pickleball courts all around the country people don't want them in residential areas, so we're trying to be sensitive to the.
Certainly, understood.
It's also, this owner may not, but they could sell it in 2 years and there's a pickleball court or something that's easily.
Don't line it as a pickleball court. Just come to Scenic
Yeah, I
Park and
know.
use the pickleball court there.
Okay. Perhaps we have codes about almost everything, but pickleball is new. Maybe the trustees should think about pickleball. Okay, we'll see you next time, and be sure, I don't know if you heard it very explicitly, but the deadline for filing for the ARB is tomorrow.
Monday.
Monday.
Yes, Monday. Yes, I'm aware. I'm
Monday,
aware.
4
Thank you.
o'clock.
Yes.
And when is the
Yes.
actual meeting?
The fourth Monday of the month.
Okay. Okay?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay, next on the list is 2025-13, Mercy University, 555 Broadway.
There's Mercy, one other, and that's.
We just need one moment to queue up our presentation here. Take one moment, please. Meantime, I'm happy to inform you the Yankees are already losing 5-0 in the first inning. We'll be tied for first with Toronto by the end of the night.
And the day right on the,
I will. Seth Mandelbaum, Macaulay Goldberger, and Stout, Yankee fan married to a Met fan. Good evening. Pleased to be here once again on behalf of Mercy University. With me once again are Tom Simmons, Vice President for Operations and Facilities, and Chris Tramotola from Alloy Design Studio, the project architect. As you may remember, at our last discussion on June 4th, we discussed an alternative location for the proposed field house on the Irvington side of the Mercy campus. And Tom has been meeting with representatives from the Artley Park Property Owners Association regularly. And I think you probably saw their email from yesterday supporting the alternative location further west on the site, on the other side of Arizona Hall, sort of on the parking lot. We can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, on the parking lot, the western side that was originally going to be renovated. We're now, if we can go to the next slide, proposing to flip the field house, the blue shown on this, which Chris and Tom will give you a little more detail. We lose 120 or so parking spaces that way, so now those are proposed up where the current tennis courts are and where the field house was previously proposed, with enhanced landscaping, pedestrian connectivity, all the other goals of having the campus more connected with different quads and other features. And as you'll hear from Chris, his design really tries to work with that slope. As you go down toward the river, it does drop down quite quickly, as anyone's familiar with the campus. As you're coming down that long parking lot, you're going down pretty much the whole time. But Chris has designed kind of a really cool architectural building that the other spot didn't really give him that much wiggle room, it seemed like, but he'll explain that in architecture speak, not lawyer speak. So this evening, we're asking the board to consider referring us over to the ZBA. We still do need 3 variances, one for coverage, one for building height, and one for the size of the parking spaces. We no longer need the setback variances we needed previously because it's further away from that municipal border, and Marianne and I have actually discussed whether that's even a lot line, but it's sort of irrelevant now because the building is further north than the old building. So with that, Tom, maybe you could just speak a little bit about kind of your discussions with the POA and how we landed on this spot and how you sold it to your board. And then Chris can give you a little more detail, and then we're happy to have a little discussion. And I think in my conversation with Mary Ann, we talked about perhaps starting to delve into the seeker documents a little bit, if the board is ready to do so, before we go off to the zoning board.
Good evening, Tom Simmons, Mercer University. Last time you had said to us when we showed an alternate site.
So you don't have to. Right, you back.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. That you said it was kind of our decision to come back with you with what we thought was best. So we took a couple things into consideration. One, the original site that we had proposed, there was some concerns with massing, the size of the building and the height and the mass, and maybe the blank back of it that was facing the community. There was some concerns raised about views that we didn't think really had merit when we looked at some of those to see if it was blocking views. There was some concerns with trees, which I think any solution that we're going to look at is going to look at certain trees that we think need to be replaced, and we think we're on a good path with that. And then, the last piece was just kind of the idea of the eagle and some of the concerns of the construction happening so close to the nest. So we considered those when we looked at the other site alternative. As I explored that with the designers and talked with my fellow leaders, the real thing that sold us on the new location was the ability to open the building up more and have the whole back of the building have a lot of glass so we could overlook the water and do that site. It helps with the massing. And when I spoke with APOA, they were okay. They're amenable with the parking piece that we wanted to put up there, the 124 spaces to put that in, and the 2 courts and the road and those sorts of pieces. You'll see on there, we added another section of the community walk right above the parking area on the right that kind of copies some of what we did in the informal gardens up on the front of the building, which was something they had asked to. And it kind of accommodates that green open space that we've talked about a couple times that we really had no plans to have something go over that far anyway. So we thought that was a positive thing. We're on a good track, and I'm just here to tell you that I think it's a solid project, and we'll go through some details.
Yeah, when you were presenting last time,
Yes,
reading your body language, it seemed like you were a little excited about
I was.
the new site.
I was.
Yeah, you could tell.
Okay, well, thank you.
I have a question for Ed. Ed, he mentions a coverage variance.
Also, we resolved that.
What do you mean by resolve?
Special permit section of 224.8 allow for 15.
So he does or does not?
Yeah, we just changed the reference.
So he does not need a
Does
variance.
not need a variance at this time.
Okay. You got that?
For coverage.
For coverage.
Coverage. Not for the other stuff. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Good evening, Chris Tremitola from Alloy Design Studio. As Tom mentioned, we have now shifted the location of the building, so we're moving forward with the location that's at the top of the steep slope leading from the Hudson River. As you can see here, to give a little bit of a better sense of exactly where this is going in terms of the existing condition, you can see where this is being placed over the existing parking areas. The lower lot is taking the majority of the building, although we have shifted the building since the last meeting towards the east, which allows for a plaza on the west side, which would be right at the top of the slope there, without requiring any earthwork or severe earthwork right at the top of that slope, so we're not chasing contours all the way down that steep slope condition. You can see on the next one here exactly the proposed condition. So utilizing the contours there between Verrazano Hall and Fieldhouse, we create a small quad in front of the Fieldhouse building, and you can see the plaza on the west side of the building with an overlook. And a difference from the previous location, as Seth mentioned earlier, having it down here with a quad right in front of it instead of having the parking immediately in front of the building allowed us to have a little bit more creativity with the form of the building, which is why you see a little bit more undulation in that
facade on the right, where we can interact with green space immediately outside of the building instead of vehicular space. As we come up to the former site, where we're now proposing the parking to be relocated, we have an access drive that cleans up the access for cars to Verrazano Hall, which right now, as Tom mentioned at the last meeting, we have a pathway, a pedestrian path that's just extra wide, and cars drive down that because that's the only way to get there. It makes a unsafe condition, as you might imagine, as people and cars are using the same space. So this would reorganize the campus a bit to utilize the same roadway that's being proposed for the parking.
To show.
No, it doesn't really work on the screen, unfortunately. I can go over and point. Oh,
You're talking about here, right?
yes.
So that's.
I'll be the point.
Don't have to.
There's a walkway that is here, that accesses here. So this is where people are walking and driving along this wide. It's only wide enough for one car in one direction. And so because we need this access way for this parking loop anyway, we made this connection that formalizes through the existing opening driveway that's here in this court. So we're bringing that access through.
So that, is that a road going towards the building?
This here? Yes. Well,
So where do the cars go from that road?
right now, this roadway hooks up to here only. So we're removing this portion that curves up and makes this connection, and we're just bringing this down and connecting here.
I still don't like why someone's driving up to the door and turning around.
There's a small parking area here.
Oh, okay.
There's four, the scale might not be so easily read, but there's enough parking here for about 4 or 5 cars.
So is that handicap parking?
That's reserved parking for staff who are in this building. And there's handicap parking that's over here.
As long as we're on that road, the road continues up to Hudson.
No, this would be blocked off just as it is now.
Yeah, but that is a road.
This
That
portion,
heads north.
this is existing.
Yeah, no, you're not.
Oh, sorry.
From the road that goes west to Verrazano, right at that, go back to your east. Now go north, that's a road.
Yes.
The issue might be a temptation to use that as access from Hudson, since it's a road. And well, that's where we're going. You do something better than a horse in a chain.
That's in the old special
They're not
permit.
gonna be able to capture.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, the old-
Like a gate.
On the Zoom, they won't be able to.
Okay.
capture
the
that.
special permit.
Yeah, Tom Simmons again. So we've offered to replace that gate in the same manner we did on the landing side and the other side. If we take a look at that, we'd be glad to duplicate that. It went through a lot of design review over there, and it'll be better than the sawhorse that's there.
Look better too.
Absolutely. And keep in mind, there's that road that goes in front of all 3 of those buildings over there right now that we limit traffic there. It's mostly for emergency access, and that's what we'll do with the same.
Well, with the road I pointed out.
Yep.
It'd be temptation to use that road to get to Verrazano now.
So we can control that back on the road with either, a gate or some limited thing, similar like we do on the landing side. So we would be open to
And talking about those buildings, though, there's an oak tree the size of my house.
the black oak.
Yeah.
An arborist has told us it's one of the oldest black oaks he thinks in New York State.
There should be some special protection for it.
Any eagles in it?
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No problem. Chris Tremitola again. So as you can see here, we have the parking, the play courts there. The tennis court that you see on the right side of the parking is essentially in the same location as the easternmost tennis court that's existing. We'll have a photo to show how that placement works. A little quick overview of the plan view of the building and how that has changed. Some of the forms are very similar to the last time you saw it, which is the main open space with the play courts inside. Many of the same amenities, a little bit more undulation on the bottom facade there of the image. And as we go, we have a mezzanine on this with a walking track as well. The only key difference that I will mention here on the mezzanine level, along with the lower level, is now our back facade here, the back of the building is now covered in glass, right? Opposed to a stucco there. So if we go here, you can see that the bottom elevation there is the side looking at the river. So you have river views from the entire main space. And you can see the glass on the top view. That's what's facing back into campus and has that great relationship with the quad spaces that are immediately adjacent. The only side that really is not that dynamic is facing the wetlands to the north. That we are tight to a drop off there for the slope. And then referencing back to the original site, we are keeping our soundproof barrier, temporary barrier here during construction, even though it's only flat work here proposed at the moment, because we are within the 200 meters of the Eagle's Nest. And we've also put together a package and contacted DEC for clarification if a permit from DEC is required for this work. So we sent all the information, much of which is in this presentation, to them electronically.
Last time I handed you the
Yeah,
paperwork and the website, I recall, do we need a permit?
yes, and it's,
What's
the technical term is we're asking for a jurisdictional determination or a JD. I can share that with the board or with staff.
Well, wait till we hear from DEC.
Yeah, it's basically saying, you know,
They submit it to DEC, we'll see what DEC.
right, our
says.
conclusion, not surprisingly, is that we don't believe we need a permit. Particularly since within 100 meters, there's no impact. The parking lot is within 200 meters, but the building no longer is. So we'll see what they come back with. If we need a DEC permit, we'll let you know. If we don't, we'll let you know.
Yeah, we can wait.
Thank you for that, because that keyed us on to the way to submit that electronically was Chris's office.
Okay.
Yes. So we submit that. Here, just showing some overall grading of how we're dealing with the slopes here. The tighter contours there are where we have those curvilinear walls between the flatter space, that's the circle, and the higher space, that's the sloping lawn just off of Verrazano. And here on the parking, we're utilizing the grades of that are existing as best as possible there of the tennis courts, and then making those connections again with the roadway connection up towards Mayor Hall and down towards Verrazano.
With the new configuration, those trees that everyone, public mostly, was talking about, the tall trees that are to the east of the existing tennis court, are they still going to be saved with the new configuration?
We are saving two of the large oaks, the actual significantly sized oaks. Many of the evergreens that are in poor health will still be removed, the majority of the evergreens.
We'll be looking forward to eventually the planting plan or landscape plan.
Right.
And then Susan will look at it, what you're saving and
Yes.
what you're planting.
Yes.
And in terms of hiding the parking lot, on the north side of the parking lot, any thought of a slight berm? So the view lines from Hudson, you would know if you need any berm. If you draw some view line, then you'll know an elevation of a berm that you wouldn't see the roof of the cars.
Given the slope of the land,
It may happen now.
it may already be happening, especially along the eastern edge here where we have a natural berm.
Yeah.
One of the pieces that we actually discussed during the redesign of this space, we were initially only putting the path to connect on the north side here, and we looped that around on the south side of the green space as well, not only to make a loop, but to provide a buffer planting area where we can have larger grasses, larger shrubs, similar to what we're doing up just to the east of that. So we have that in mind to create a visual barrier there for the parking.
You'll see a photo in a little bit that really shows that.
So just a couple pretty pictures of the building as proposed here. We have from the quad area looking into the building, seeing the main spaces inside, the access through, and all of the glass, the cowl wall that's above to give it natural light, a natural glow. Your approach here for your drop off, and the pedestrian access from the rest of campus. And then we did our balloon wire diagrams as well. You can kind of see that it's a little tricky to understand that from here, given the hedge, you can't see that the parking actually drops down to a lower elevation on the other side of those shrubs. We have another view that's a little further back, the same condition where it drops to a lower elevation there. So some of it looks to be a little low. Here's from just above the pool, obviously, where it's sitting at the top of the parking. Here is an image from the highest point of the knoll that's between the OCA and the tennis courts, where I was unable to see any, so we couldn't model out anything, but there was no visual of the building beyond the Verrazano. You can see the white line that's here depicting on the image of where our border of the tennis court is being proposed. We are essentially within 5 feet of the existing tennis court there.
You mean where the parking lot's being proposed?
The tennis court is actually furthest east, so we're putting a tennis court essentially where their tennis court is. And then we took an image here of the beautiful horse and chain that we were just talking about. We knew we were going to talk about this. And it's hard to see, but that red dot right there is one of the balloons. And I wanted to be as transparent as possible. And so from this intersection, there is a tiny red dot there just above the edge of the, so this is the paving parking lot that's here where the handicap spots are that we referenced earlier. And right above that, you can see the top half of one of the balloons. And so given the slope here, you're at essentially eye level with the roof from this. So it's the absolute majority of the building would be blocked by just the earth.
I think the oak tree I referenced, you can see it.
Yes, it's right there, yeah.
Further, way back, yeah. One of your pictures, we were out there yesterday, and the parking lot where the new buildings go have storage vehicles, your buses and vans. And our building is gonna displace that vehicle storage area. You know where you're gonna displace it to? Hopefully not the new parking lot.
No, this is Tom Simmons again. Most of those we park at our Terrytown annex that we have on Broadway. Yeah, the Terrytown building we own over on there. So we put them there during the school year, and those sometimes in the summer we move them back, and they're easier with the camps when we move people around and stuff. But primarily when they're not being used, they're parked over at our Terrytown site.
Like I said, they were there yesterday.
And yeah, we move them back. The drivers get a little lazy, so they don't take them back during the summer.
How do we
because a
know
lot's
it's not gonna
empty.
be in the new parking lot? Because it's a lot, those things are a lot higher than.
Because I'm telling you, they won't be there. We can commit to that. No, there's smaller spaces and the radius is to pull them in and stuff like that. We would be conscious of that. We wouldn't want to park those type of vehicles in there.
Okay.
And we're here at the end of the presentation where we're circling back to the full view. And just to go over the overall scope, and you can see the blue dashed lines, which is what we placed around the significant disturbance of the project. Not everything, it doesn't include the pathway that goes along the north edge of the property. But this is to give a sense of where exactly we're doing this proposal. Happy to answer any questions.
I forget the magic acreage number, but do they meet the magic number for drainage? Street?
Yeah, they still have to address all that.
Yeah, we were not able to update the SWIP and all of that at the moment, but it's in progress given the shift of the building.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch. Drainage is gonna, you gotta do drainage but I think we're okay to, the height is a threshold issue and rather than going through all these details without knowing if you're gonna get a variance on that, I think we're okay, and I'll told the board would go into the ZBA and then coming back to all these technical stuff, dealing with Ed and Doug on those issues. And coming back with the DEC determination. Lori? Two things. Do you have any comments and you're okay
Yeah,
with
no,
them
I
going
have,
to the
I have no
ZBA?
question.
And okay to go to the ZBA?
Yes, I'm fine with them to go to the ZBA. I just want to thank you again for being good neighbors. I think it's a really important partnership. I would love a little more detail on that quad and the curved walls. I'm just trying to understand exactly what's happening there.
Way back here.
Yes, well,
The amphitheater.
exactly. Is that what that's meant to be? Is that like you can sit there?
Yes, so
Okay.
Hey, Chris, I think Tom. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so programmatically, the Verrazano Hall, which is the building on the right, it has a grade that drops way down. But I wanted to make sure the front of the building had an area that could spill out on grade flat outside of it for a variety of things. So the way to do that is Chris has proposed a series of kind of boulder walls like we put out in the front on some of the pieces and that could work to step the grade, and then sometimes informally people can just sit on those, but we're not planning on it being a formal amphitheater or anything programmatically like that. It's more of open space with.
More attractive than, an 8-foot wall.
Yeah.
Correct.
Can you step down, or are they too
Yes.
high that you have to do it on the sides?
On the side is the walkways you'll see on each side.
Okay, got it. That helps. So
We
it's
did
all
s-
meant to be grass.
Yeah, and we did something similar on the back of by our turf field. If you've seen the large artificial turf field, they're kind of precast stones. In this case, we would make them out of natural stone out front, but they're precast and they're grass on the top where you sit on a little piece, and they work informally. They do a nice job if you get a chance to go over there and look at it. But it's more as an informal thing to capture the green area, like an open area.
And remind me, it's Verrazano Hall, is that right?
Yes.
It's classrooms and dorm?
No,
No.
Verrazano Hall is the administration building.
Oh, just administration. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy with the location and I'm fine with them going to the CBA.
Yeah, I initially I didn't think much of location on the perimeter, but it really enhanced, I think, makes the campus bigger. It's not just, and the river is there as an attribute, so why not take advantage of it as an attribute? With the glass wall. Mike,
I'm fine with going to the ZBA.
any comment?
No, I can't wait for it to be
Mike
built.
B?
Yeah, I think it's great and happy to have them go to the ZBA.
Susan, I have a question.
Sure.
Yeah. We got board got a letter from APOA. And in it, it said that, or an email, said that, you were designating the expanded area and remaining open space as open space in an operating agreement to be submitted with a special permit renewal. We understand this is a 5-year commitment. Could you tell me what that is?
Yeah, I asked Tom the same thing.
Oh, okay.
So our special.
I guess it's a lawyer's kind of question.
Well, our special permit runs through October 31st, 2027. It's 5-year renewal you gave us in 2022. And Tom, I believe that the discussion was in the context of the special permit renewal. There would be a written condition, I suppose, or something enforceable that provides that area with those paths for that renewal period would not be developed or proposed with any buildings or anything else, right, Tom? If you can give a little more detail on what. Talked about.
Sure, I'd be glad to.
Getting a lot of exercise, getting. a-
Yeah, Tom Simmons again. So their concern was when they supported this new location that we wouldn't come back and try to put another building in these kind of green zones that are pretty close to Hudson Road and everything. So, and not to be perfectly frank, when they mention a covenant, it's not something that, forever the Mercy would consider or our board would consider. But I was willing to say that, yeah, we're not committed. We're committed. I can say we're committed to not building something else or extending the parking in that whole area. And they asked if we could memorialize that somehow. And I said, yeah, we'll be glad of having it as a condition of the building or putting in the operating permit since we
Okay, could I-
function under.
Okay,
operating permit.
could I just suggest that Seth draft whatever you're talking about, and not now,
Yeah,
but
no,
just.
understood. And I didn't understand what they meant by operating agreement either.
Yeah,
I think they meant the conditions of special permit.
Yeah, but there's still a period before the special permit.
Right, so it's a little
So come
awkward,
up
but
with,
you and I,
with something.
Mary and I will put our heads together.
Draft it and I'll take a look.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Mary Ann, before I go to the public on this, should we do the environmental?
Well, you can go, Yeah,
This
that's
way they
not
don't
a
have to
bad
go
idea.
twice.
Okay, yeah. Then if they've got anything to say, they can respond, yeah.
So the public, you'll have comment. We're gonna go through this environmental assessment. And then you can combine all your comment. If anybody wants to read through it, there's some extra copies in the back there. If anybody wants. to-
But Caesar, please explain that you're not making a determinate, okay. This is just to identify possible environmental impacts, and a good way to do it is by using this environmental assessment form. Not to answer yes or no, but to identify what issues there might be and tell you guys to address it. So some of them you'll go through very quickly and some. Were you gonna go through it, Caesar?
Good. You want me
You
to
wanted
read?
me to? I can do that.
Okay.
Okay, and the board, you know what I do? I'll read it. If you guys see an issue, then we'll say, go look at that. Will the proposed action create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regulations? And I think it's pretty clear, no, it's permitted. Will it result in a change in the use or intensity of use of land? I think the board discussed that with them. What was it gonna mean that more people were,
No,
coming to
I think
campus
we-
and whatever?
we-
But I think we talked about
We
that.
talked about the venue not being an event.
Yeah.
Venue. It's a basketball and indoor tennis. We talked about, doesn't have stands for viewers to watch a basketball. So
And will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community? You can answer those later, but if you see an issue that they need to research, we'll do that. Okay, will it have
the
an,
Eagle, they're researching the Eagle.
yeah, I think that'll that'll come up in number 9. Will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a CEA? This is a CEA because almost everything in Irvington is because it's on the Hudson River. Will it result in an adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affect existing infrastructure for mass transit, biking, or walkway?
Now they're increasing the walkways.
Will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and fail to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation or renewable energy opportunities? Will it impact public-private water supplies or public-private wastewater treatment utilities? Will it impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources? Will it result in an adverse change to natural resources, wetlands, water bodies? I think that's where the Eagle issue would come up. I'll look at that. Will it result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage problems?
Now, the drainage problems, there are drainage issues. I don't know if they're a problem, but they're gonna be addressed by them and Doug.
Yeah, so hopefully when that's all in, you'll be able to answer no to that. And will it create a hazard to environmental resources or human health? So I don't think,
There was a question, I should have commented on, about the community, and apparently there was quite a bit of community interaction.
right.
I do have a question. I don't know if it is going to make a difference, but in terms of
Say the number first.
number 2, and I guess maybe the traffic one, it's something I brought up before. Because it's an indoor space, it is reasonable to use in the evening prior to that. Any activities that are taking place, even if it's, basketball court somewhere else, that's now reasonable to do. So the use of it could theoretically change where in the dark, no one was playing tennis or playing basketball, but now that's potentially 5 more hours every day that the land could be used. I don't know how many people could conceivably be in the building at any given time, if that matters, but that's a big change to the use of the land.
We talked about 11 o'clock, the lights go off.
Yeah, that's in the special, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, 11 o'clock, that's correct. And remind you that we had a bubble that was 2 courts on campus that we took down. So we had, for a lot of years, some of this activity happening before that outlived its life.
I'm
Yeah.
more pointing out that the intensity changed in the land. As opposed to, I don't know when the bubble went down, but now it could be used by how many people could
23.
23 people could use
No,
it.
the bubble went down at 23.
Oh, no.
The maximum occupancy here is gonna be 1,000. That would be.
But it's 1,000 people that are already on campus, isn't it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right, but
And the 1,000 people is based on you. So Chris does a great job with the exiting and everything you need for the HVAC and all those things. It's not,
code.
yeah, that's based on the square.
but
footage.
it's sports, which I don't, as far as I know, there's not indoor sports facilities available now that move from new indoor sports, which means
Yes, that's
Right, well, but a field house is, has painted stripes on it, and the 3 open courts is a big open area. So the idea is you can use it for a variety of,
I
so,
understand.
right, where the gyms are,
Now, after when the sun goes down, and
Mhm.
it's not light out, no one has the opportunity to participate in sports somewhere because it's dark out.
other than our
Once this is
gymnasium.
up, 50, 100, 500 people could be on campus participating in sports for a very long period of time, when previously that was not an opportunity for anybody. Not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying it's a huge difference in the potential use.
I'll take a look at that issue. Didn't you say a gym or two that were coming down?
We had 2 gyms. One was converted to nursing space. The other gym is up in Victory Hall, and that's being used, and that's the one that's overstressed with that in the tennis bubble, so this will help with that. But I remember I told you both of the gyms were the older ones. When you took a layup, you would hit the wall. They were built in the 70s, so we didn't invest in both of them. We made one into split the floor and made it into a nursing wing for the college.
I mean, this doesn't say a change or a period. Like, I don't know if this is
No,
changed in the
but
last
it's-
year, changed in the last 10 years, 5 years. I can only speak to the last.
I take a look at that.
And in secret, in sort of as a secret issue, that would not be a significant.
Having
Having a gym on a college campus, I think you would be having a hard time saying. that
I mean,
it's
it's
actually adding
A university
attribute to an
campus,
existing facility.
Yeah,
It's not
and it's
adding.
the same people that are
Right.
there. It would be different if it
you
was.
keep saying it's not the same. The people don't live there from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. every single night, right? So it's not the
Oh, yeah,
same.
Mike, if you.
We have traffic reports that we get from you every week.
Yes, enrollment and traffic counts. And
No, yeah, parking was.
Yeah.
So we could monitor their, which we do, their parking traffic. And there's a limit to that, isn't there?
I don't know. No, we just reviewed. I don't know. I forget if there's.
Yeah, there was a high water mark. back
There
in
was a high
60.
one, and you've been way below it, but I don't know what I think the
I
point
know
of
it's
looking.
less
Yes,
because of train and dormitories.
yes.
Right. Okay, well, we,
Work on it.
fair point.
Come back with something. Okay, we're done with that. Okay. Anybody on the
No.
board, now that we've done that, other than Mike? Do we have any comment from the public on Mercy University?
Nobody's raising their hand to speak and there are no comments in the chat.
Anybody in the room? Yes.
Hi, Acid Track, Strawberry Lane.
Can you Tell us your address, please.
Going to Strawberry Lane. I have a question about, I might have missed the part of presentation. Are you adding additional parking spots or are you just relocating park lot to a different location?
Ladder.
Yeah.
Say it in the mic.
Make Tom get up again.
Tom, you can just use the mic.
Just stand up, Tom.
Oh, I get the ladder. We are committed to just moving what spots we have,
And not the storage.
not the storage, not the big vehicles. Yes.
Anybody else in the audience? Okay. I think you're okay going, you all said it's okay to go to the ZBA. Rather than what you said, indicating that coverage is not an issue for variance.
Yeah, I actually have a question about that. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Ask it.
Okay?
No.
The reason we don't need a coverage variance, that the special permit provision only talks about buildings, not impervious. I just double checked it.
Let's call Marianne tomorrow.
Okay, I just want to make sure
You're
we're
not gonna
getting,
be able to reach me anymore.
I just want to make sure we're, for that section of the code for the special permit for educational, says 15% max for accessory and main building.
Oh, but okay, but our definition of buildings means any combination of buildings.
Okay. So again, just to make sure we're getting the right variances.
I will review
The
it.
calculation came up like 18.
Yeah, we're over, yeah.
We're over
Over.
15%.
You're over 15%.
Which is why we thought we needed a variance.
Yeah.
On the cover, including all the pathways and other things in that
So I
chart.
talked to Marianne, but I believe that our definition of building coverage kind of intermingle each other.
Okay.
The definition of building is construction.
To include paving.
So that would include all the paving.
Okay, again, I just want to make sure
All right.
if we
Yeah, but
might
he's,
need,
he's saying that
He's
we need a
up.
variance.
yeah, so that's why,
We'll look at that.
and we're gonna file a request for you, a denial letter with you.
I'll get it. Now, I want Doug to look at the rear yard setback line. Also, just so you know, before I write that back.
Okay, as long as, yeah, we're shooting to file by the 14th to get on the August 19th, because I guess the summer is a longer deadline for the zoning board.
You're going to the August meeting.
We're going for the August meeting, but we have to file by the 14th.
Yep.
So we'll
I got
be
it.
back to you on Monday with, you know, what we think the variances are, so you guys can.
We're gonna work on it.
Or tomorrow is even better. Why not? Thank you.
Wait
Before
for it
you
on
go,
Friday.
Right, Friday I know I can answer.
Ed raised a question that I didn't think of until just 2 seconds ago.
Okay.
The county has a sewer that goes down to Yonkers.
County drop.
It's either a gravity or a force main. Force main from the pump station in Irvington. I don't know where it is. I hope it's not in the footprint of the building.
Okay, Chris, do we, our engineers?
You don't need to answer tonight.
Let's make sure, yeah, you don't want to put a building over the county trunk line. We got you.
Well, what happens is you have to go down in Mount Vernon, when, you know, big box stores
Mm-hmm.
right on top of the county force main.
Right.
The county had to move the force main in order to build the building.
Wow. Okay, well, we don't want to do that. Okay, do you normally do a formal resolution when you send us to zoning, or it's just sufficient that you
No.
discussed it?
We went like this.
Okay, very
No
good.
resolution.
Thank you, everyone. Have a very safe 4th of July. Ed, we'll talk. And we'll see you when we see you in the fall.
Yeah,
Go to zoning board.
and Doug, you got a technical letter out, or you will?
Yeah, we received
He
it.
already has it.
Yeah, there's quite a bit in there in drainage,
Uh-huh.
slopes and.
Yep, the engineer, I think, got it as well, right? So they can use the time we're in front of the zoning board to hopefully catch up on technical issues. Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Take care.
By the way, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to go to number 5. Slight deviation from the plan version. And that's going to be 2024-0606 39 Fargo Lane.
Hello, everyone. John Malone at Ferguson Malone Architecture, representing Vanessa and Diego Sanchez. We're here tonight to request a revision to an approved plan. We have modified the building at 39 Fargo to add a little bit of additional space to accommodate an elevator. There was a change in the owner's circumstances that sort of required it, so we were in construction document phase when this change happened. So we've made this change. The thing that drove we had a long process around visual impact. So we designed this change to make sure that there's no visual impact associated with the elevator. And in terms of its impact on the overall size of the building, I'm sorry, go ahead.
When you said no visual, you mean by view preservation?
Yes, visual impact associated with the code.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in terms of its other zoning related impacts, it did have a slight impact on FAR and coverage, a few square feet of each, but we are well under allowable on either. I think on FAR we're around 50% and on coverage we're around 85. I can go over the change with you, sort of review it with you in drawings, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So here in the drawing set, we did provide diagrams showing the coverage change. Again, I mentioned it's a few square feet and we're well under. I think we're at, we were at 86% coverage and now we're at 87. And in terms of the FAR, we're still at below 60. The change to the building is represented here. So there was where this line is shown. You guys can see my cursor, okay?
Yeah.
That was approximately the location of the powder room in the approved plan. And so there was a black metal panel powder room that was protruding, and we used that footprint slightly adjusted to accommodate, you know, full-size residential elevator, and developed this form. So the outside of the building is still the same. It's this wood finish, and then the elevator shaft has slats of wood on it to it, so it's, you know, more of a softer texture. It's a little bit distinct, but it's a softer texture, not the black metal. That makes sense to people. And that's really the limit of the change that we have in front of you today.
Could you bring up the previous picture of what was without the elevator shaft, what we previously approved?
Yes, let me see if I have it here in the rendering. So.
And then flash back and forth, put them both up.
There it is before. There it is after.
Go back to before.
I personally am happier with where the design is now. I think it's sort of a stronger form. The powder room form was a little too weak now that, you know, with hindsight. So we're happy with the form. And again, the design of it, if you see in this image, the height of the elevator is below. It actually aligns, if we look at the elevation, aligns with the top of the windows here. It's an elevator that pushes up from the ground as opposed to having, you know, headspace above it. And then we did do analysis that we included in the package to make sure that it had no visual impact. That's shown here. We took the same points that were studied before. Okay. Yep, and you guys understood that. Okay.
I clarified your point on view because the view from the street definitely changes. The bulk appearance, it brings the question, if you were to start from the very beginning with an elevator shaft, would you have put it there where the current elevator shaft plopped on? Stuck on the front of the building changes what one looks at from the street, you know, substantially. And I'm not too sure to the benefit. Now, if you
actually, from an architectural perspective, I think it's really good. There's a long history of, especially in modernism, there's a long history of expressing the function of the building on the outside of the building. So in line with that, we're happy. And it also, the verticality of it sort of sets and sort of marks the entrance a little bit better. So as an architectural move, we're pretty happy with it. And we think it's appropriate.
So if you hadn't already designed the building without the elevator shaft, if you had to design the building knowing you needed an elevator shaft, you're telling me that's where you would have put it?
Possibly. I think we would have. I can't answer that, you know, because it's a hypothetical. It was added late. Really what was driving the design here, Caesar, was to limit the impact on the design that we had to date to the maximum amount, not affect the building footprint, not add to the building. But in terms of the aesthetic and aesthetic effect from it, again, I said we're really happy, and I think it's in line with a lot of history of modernism and how you would express an entrance and how you would express the use of the building.
I don't know. You know from past experience that I have an aversion to blank walls facing the street.
I think if you look at the scale of, I mean, we of course are ready to review this with the Architectural Review Board to review that. But again, this wall has texture that we think is really kind of nice. It's different than the wood on the side, but it is also wood, and you know we think it's will be really great. So
All right, there's another issue about a telephone pole.
I think we discussed that with the building department. The telephone pole is in the location where it was shown on the approved drawings. The civil drawings, they had it in a different location than we had shown it on the architecturals. We asked the civil to revise that, and we will submit the revised plan to make sure it's in the same location.
Is it in the village right away?
No, it's on our property.
Is there any plan to put a control panel on that pole?
Nope, no, that pole is just gonna have a riser, right? A typical riser to get it, the power to the ground, and then all the other material is at the house.
You have any comment, Lori?
Can you flip back to the original for a second?
Hold on one second.
Okay, so I'm gonna respectfully disagree. I actually do prefer the original, but I also would still be comfortable with you going to the ARB because I want to defer to the homeowner, their needs, and your ability as an architect to design something that everyone is happy with.
Dan?
John, the entrance to the actual elevator, is that on the inside of the building or the side as you enter the building?
It's on the inside, facing the stair area on the inside.
Interior of the house? Okay.
Yes.
And it's not a plane surface, the actual elevator shaft, is it a vertical type of lines or?
It's basically wood slats. It hasn't been finely detailed, but it's kind of a common detail more in Europe than here. So it's like a vertical wood slat. This is a heat treated wood. It's actually ash that is threatened right now, and it ends up it's going to be dead in a few years based on disease and stuff like that. So they have a system of heat treating it so that it's preserved, so it acts like kind of like mahogany and tropical woods without the impact. So it's the same wood is being shown in both locations, but this one has sort of spacing between it.
No, I would agree with Lori, given the needs of the homeowner to address their personal needs. I have no problem with it.
I would not be adverse if you planted something in front of it.
We can certainly look at that. There is, this rendering that you guys are looking at is just really the house with a few trees. It doesn't, there are trees in front of here in the property line. There's a few large trees here. So this, right, because you wouldn't see the building if we took it from there. But there are trees in this area here. But if the reason we're not, another thing we'll be careful with the plantings because we don't want them to have visual impact, code visual impact. So we can show something sort of modern and evergreen in front of this if people are concerned about its mass. There's certainly a way to plant it, and we can revise that.
Okay, Mike Smith.
Yeah, John, what was the change in the owner's circumstances?
It is medical condition. I don't know if you guys want to talk about that, but the
reason I asked is because your letter said that was the reason for it. So since you
no,
since you said it was the reason for it, I think I'm entitled to ask what it was.
No, it's the challenges of old age. So there's I don't think Diego minds me telling you there's a back issue that has the tendency it's going to be chronic. They're our age, so they're planning to age in place. Much of the fun parts of the house for Diego, the wine room and his, family room spaces in the lower level. Again, we did that to keep the volume, mass, and the height of the house down. So we had to make sure that he had access to all 3 floors of the house.
So the picture that I'm looking at actually, to me, and I'm not saying it's intentional, but it appears to be much further from the street than how I understand the house is going to be positioned. What I'm going to ask you is, where is the house? Because I don't remember, where is the house in relation to the footprint of the existing house?
That's further back. That might be, so we can show it maybe on the demo. So the original house was 50 feet off the property line. The proposed, sorry, I don't want to get people. Oh, there, as you can see, there's 75 feet. So it's, 50% further back than what it was. The original house was at the front yard at 50 feet, and we're 25 feet back from that. Because the pool got pulled out. The other house had a pool behind it.
Right.
So this is moved back. It also was moved back into this position to help with visual impact, if you remember.
So how many feet was that at the new house is further back than the old house?
The old house was at 50 feet from property line, and in the front yard, this house is 75 feet from property line.
Okay.
Just trying to visualize it, because I know walking down Fargo, how close that front of that house is to the street,
The existing house.
the existing house.
It's within the setback.
And the bulk of it. Okay, I don't have any further questions.
Mike Bufuco.
John, can you go back to the renderings of what it was?
What it was.
Yeah. The strip going across the top that's now gone, is that purely aesthetics?
Yeah, I think also to make the elevator work better aesthetically was to remove that strip.
It was just double checking, make sure it wasn't drained.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the actually that strip was removed during the process when it went to the architectural review board. So that was already gone when we were finalizing the design with the architectural review board.
I think actually it would look less drastic than if you showed the previous design without that strip.
Yeah.
And this, it wouldn't be quite as drastic of a difference, because I think that strip being on it accentuates the bulk of the elevators.
There's an architectural look to this that would it be a problem if we didn't do anything with this and send them to the ARB? Because
It's actually, I would say, in their bailiwick.
yeah, why don't you go to the ARB, John, and because I don't want to render a decision on what I think is in my opinion, that architectural point, which I'm not, that the bulk look of that the elevator shaft looking towards the street really dramatically changes the original design. And I'm not sure you would have put it there if you were to do this from scratch. So go to the ARB and see what they think and then come back.
Okay, so Will, and also if there's a strong feeling about us looking into planting, we can do that before we resubmit.
There's a strong feeling about that.
Okay.
Well, I think it would help if we saw the actual trees that are already existing, because you made a good point that we're not really seeing the existing condition.
Yeah, and it's a white background here. It's not a photorealistic rendering in the context of that. So there's some work.
Bring up what we originally approved and we'll see the trees. Maybe not in the rendering, but at least we'll know where they are located.
Right. Okay. So we can put some effort into updating this rendering before we resubmit to you guys. We'll submit to.
Just for now, show us the original what we approved where the plantings.
Oh, it's this. So again, we didn't have renderings that showed detailed.
But if you had the original approval, it will show where the trees are.
The planting plan.
Oh, I'm sorry, the planting plan, not the rendering. Sorry.
Right.
Yes, here's the planting plan. So you see, there's trees, TR5, TR3, TR2, TR1.
So there is some trees in the front. So
yeah, that's I'm not sure where the camera is in the image that you're looking at. It might be here.
Yeah,
behind the trees, right?
Okay.
Just a quick, what actually are the dimensions of the exterior of the elevator there, width and depth?
Let me see if there's dimensions that I can go through the plan. I think it's about 8 feet in one direction and 5 feet in the other. If that makes sense. Let me see if I can find
8 feet in the vertical.
No, in the yeah, like 5 feet this way and then 8 feet on the face of it.
Right. I wasn't thinking of the bump out.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Okay.
Okay, so do you guys need anything else, or we'll plan to submit on
I'm just gonna
Monday?
ask, any further comment from the board?
No comment.
Or,
Nope.
Sarah, anything in the public?
Nobody's raising their hand to speak and there are no comments in the chat.
Anybody in the audience who would like to opine on the elevator? Okay, John, you heard the deadline for the ARB is Monday?
Yeah, I think we got it. Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, we're moving on to 2024-18, 76 North Broadway. I think was just setting a record. The earliest possible time that we started on this.
That's at two
Hopefully we set the
records.
record. And now you're.
Yeah, 2 records.
Yes, we're working on it. So it's approved? Okay, sounds
Well,
good.
as long as we're not finished at 12 o'clock.
So our traffic engineer will be appearing by Zoom, so we can, thank you.
Introduce yourselves as you know.
Sorry, yes. Catherine Zelantis, Silver Zelantis, attorneys for the applicant. Carlito Holt from DTS Provident will be appearing by Zoom. There he is, great. And with me in the room is Rocco Varma from Varma Development. So just to briefly address traffic, which was discussed at the last meeting in detail. So at the last meeting, this board asked for the actual JCC student population so that it wouldn't be relying on the data as presented and interpreted by INAT. The data was presented and it established a 5644 north-south trip distribution. DTS Provident continues to maintain that 70-30 is the appropriate trip distribution, and this has been verified, by through prior methodologies by using a high volume trip distribution that came out at 70-30, by doing a 5-mile population analysis for the project site and travel route analysis that came out as 68-32 trip distribution, and a 3-mile population and travel route analysis, which established a 66-34 trip distribution. DTS Provident also prepared a sensitivity analysis, and that considered a 10% shift in the trip distribution down to 60-40, and considered the most conservative factors, essentially not taking any credit for the existing office use, double counting the total development, and not providing for any fractional seconds timing adjustment. And based on that, AKRF confirmed that the proposed staggered arrival departure and signalization changes completely mitigated both traffic delay and queuing at all the studied intersections. So the latest JCC data that you now have is in line with that 60-40 trip distribution. But now that that data has been provided of this existing preschool population establishing a 56-44 traffic distribution, INAC's traffic engineer baselessly claims that the planning board should just simply disregard that data and instead apply a 35-65 distribution based upon his claimed quote analogy method. But this analogy method completely ignores where the JCC students are actually located, their actual locations, and ignores that the JCC draws its student population from a higher density area located north of the property, but south of the JCC. And now that the JCC data doesn't support INAT's narrative, INAT just wants to ignore the data of the student's location, even though that's the best empirical evidence to date, the best survey evidence of potential student locations for the Primrose School. This is their MO. Essentially, every time they're presented with empirical data supporting a trip distribution, they come back and suggest an even lower trip distribution. As you may recall, the first suggested trip distribution based on a bunch of low volume streets, which is not a proper traffic methodology. They claim should be a 50-50 trip distribution. Then when this board said go out and do the 60-40 sensitivity analysis, INS traffic engineer came back with a survey of a use that was not comparable and said it should be based on 40-60. And now that we have the JCC data, the actual data of where students attending a preschool are located, the traffic engineer comes back again with another skewered distribution pattern of 65-35 based upon an invented methodology that ignores the actual location of the student population.
Excuse me, you mean 65-35?
65-35, what did I say?
Consultant said,
The consultant said 35-65.
not 65.
Correct, that would be better. And now that this information has been provided, it's clear the actual data doesn't support INS position. We were hit with a flurry of emails, cut and paste emails, maybe 25, 30, that's all said the same thing. And it's clear that this is just an opposition tactic to further delay to an opposition, as you know, is not a basis to deny this application. While AKRF has now recommended a 50-50 traffic distribution as a quote worst case scenario, all indicators and analysis done actually support that the floor for a traffic distribution should be 60-40 and not actually 50-50. But to remain extremely conservative, the village's traffic consultant has recommended 50-50 trip distribution mitigation plan, that's something that they want to see from the applicant, which Mr. Holt can address in further detail.
Thank you. Yes, you're correct, though. Consultant said 50-50 based on JC raw data. And she'll go through that. Let them finish their presentation. Yeah, unless you're finished.
I was going to have Carlito Holt.
You're on.
Good evening, everyone. Carlito Holt with DTS Provident, traffic consultant for the application. Yeah, I don't want to reiterate some of what Kathy already stated. I would go into a few other items that were noted in Stephen Maffia's June 27th letter. One referenced old and refuted data being used. I'm not sure which data that is, but I would note that they relied on or used Toll Brothers traffic study, which is from 2016. So, that data is older than any data that we're relying on. We concur with AKRF's conclusion on how to apply the JCC student locations. There was another reference to a second left turn lane being added for mitigation. We're not proposing an additional left turn lane. We're proposing to slightly extend the left turn lane through restriping, which there's adequate distance to perform that mitigation. With respect to the hourly trip distributions, where it's unclear without backup data how they arrived at their conclusions, but we've been using the same trip rate data that's been employed throughout the process and as approved by the village's professional traffic engineering consultant. There was a statement about drop off and pickup, but I'm not sure if it was more of a statement or a comment, but we've demonstrated that there's more than adequate on-site queuing for drop-off and pickup operations. Ms. Salantis already referred to the fact that we're not taking any credit for the office use, and there was reference to additional southern study locations. The locations that we analyzed as approved by the village's traffic consultant are a representative sample of locations that could have potential impacts. Any locations further south would actually experience less project generated trips than the locations that we analyzed. And with respect to the 50-50 analysis, we can perform that analysis. Well, we performed that analysis. We have to take it a step further to recommend mitigation. What we do know is that the mitigation, it's going to be a combination of having to reduce the overall student population as well as employ the staggering that's been previously proposed. So we can arrive at what that final number is through the technical analysis and coordinating with the village's consultant.
Okay. Done? Has the presentation been completed? I don't know if you can hear me.
Are the,
Yeah.
is that complete?
Yep, I think that was everything.
Thank you. Before we go on, it's as someone mentioned, there's been quite a bit of correspondence. And pretty much the gist of all the correspondence I'll read. The I is not me, it's the writer of this. I was disappointed to learn that the traffic consultants for the planning board in Varmer have decided on their own that the trip distribution for 76 North Broadway project should not be lower than 50/50. Well, first of all, there was no joint decision, there was no collusion and joint decision to come up with 50/50. It was our consultants, who doesn't have a horse in the race, came up with this through the analytical looking at the raw data that we requested from the JCC. So moving on, I respectfully ask the planning board to make sure that the AKRF Varmer decision not be acted on until the public has had a meaningful chance to weigh in at the next meeting. As I understand it, the recommendations made by the traffic engineer working for the residents of North Broadway have been disregarded by AKRF and DTS. That's not accurate, and a little bit further, Elaine from AKRF will address that. If nothing else, Varmer should be required to address each one of these recommendations before a final decision on trip distribution is made. And as I said, it's quite a bit, just to recognize, and I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce many of these names. This is a list of names who either signed on to this particular document or slightly using their own words, essentially the same points. Anthony Altamira, Peter McCullough, John and Fiora DeLuna, Gina Bonario, Luke Yeager, Iger Gleiker, Len Cashin, Libby Lando, Jessica Rubin, Gordon Feary, Bernie and Isabella Milano, David Rubin, Maggie and Ryan Gaudreau, Glennis Cotton, Richard Levine, Paul Kirby, Beth Proper, Peter Baderi, Daniel Brodio, Karen Donahue, was easy, David Osborne, Terry Uppert, Altamura, Kevin McLaughlin, Catherine Arsar, Glenn DeLuca, John Marinas, Steve Gardner, Stephen Mangicotti, Marianne Gruber, Michelle and Nancy Adler, Elena Novatskia, Nato Gabriades, Stefania Fable, Vesco Miloshev, and Jack Sissom. I'm sorry if I mangled some of those words, some of those names. I think let me ask Elaine to address some of the things I already mentioned. She did a thorough and thoughtful evaluation of the JCC data, an independent evaluation, I might add. And she did review the material submitted by the Irvington traffic people and their consultant outfit. And there are reasons why 3565 were eliminated. Elaine, do.
Yes,
Not
Elaine
new.
Du, not new. Elaine Du, AKRF, the village's traffic consultant. Thank you, Caesar, for talking through some of the misinformation and what's been happening so far, and as well as the comments. I want to confirm that, yes, we did come up with the 50/50 simply based on the student numbers. So we looked at all of the information that JCC provided, the zip code information, the zone information, and we landed at 5248. And that's within the 3-mile radius. And if you include everyone else that's on that list, and conservatively assign Hartsdale and Scarsdale students coming from the south, you end up getting 5347. However, to be conservative, I'm recommending 50-50 as opposed to the 5248 or the 60-40. Whereas you're hearing today, the applicant is still, and still saying 60-40 or 70-30 is the likely scenario, but as the reasonable worst case scenario, we are recommending 50-50. It's going to be hard to mitigate too, we understand that, but we believe that it is, again, the reasonable worst case scenario. Why not 35-65? There are multiple reasons there. So the INAT's traffic consultant memo, INAT's traffic consultant had recommended using, sorry, just want to put that memo quickly. Oh, sorry, I had it folded. So INAT's traffic consultant had recommended using the analogy method, which is where you take a land use that is very similar. You take a site that is similar, not just in land use, but also geography, location. They need to be very close to each other, first of all. It doesn't meet any of that criteria. Firstly, the JCC site is just a daycare. A preschool. The JCC site is just a preschool. It is located right next to 287, which really skews your directional split. And it can also draw students further east from White Plains, from other locations. We're not recommending using that because it's so different. It's going to really, just having the site located next to 287 really changes things. And beyond that, the 76 North Broadway site is over a mile south. So just because you have a site that's kind of similar doesn't mean you can apply the same percentage splits. In my opinion, the best information that we have is the addresses of the students where the students actually live. So these two schools will be drawing from a very similar population base. And the JCC currently draws from a lot of Irvington, including what is north of Strawberry Lane and what is south of Strawberry Lane. As a result, again, based on the data, 50-50 is most appropriate. Beyond that, not just in terms of numbers, I also want to mention 35-65 is not a realistic scenario. And if we analyze and mitigate to a scenario that's not realistic, what ends up happening is we risk potentially more impacts further north. So whereas a 70-30 split or the 60-40 split, you'll see more impacts to the north. The 35-65 split, you'll see more impacts to the south. So whereas I believe 50-50 is a very realistic scenario and 35-65 is not, again, if you are mitigating to 35-65, you're missing the intersections to the north. You're not addressing potential issues there, especially at Heritage, Sunnyside, those intersections up there. So we want to make sure we're capturing everything. And in my professional opinion, 50-50 is the most appropriate measure, is the most appropriate scenario for that. I believe that's most of what has come up. And in terms of the INAT's traffic consultant's memo, I'm more than happy to discuss that. Carlito has discussed that in detail already, but I'm more than happy to talk through it a little more. I want to mention one more thing in terms of what comes next. So in terms of the mitigation measures, you have traffic signal timing changes. You also have the lengthening of queue lanes. You also have some striping measures like do not block box and things like that. And on the school side, you have staggering arrivals. So the village needs to have a way to enforce that, to understand the mitigations and enforce them regularly, not just have it in the conditions and never check it again. And that's why potentially a post-implementation study might be appropriate here. I know I had talked to Ed briefly about this, but potentially looking at, in what manners can we check that the mitigation measures are being implemented. That's going to be key because there are, again, a long list of mitigation measures. We want to make sure they're all implemented to make sure that the analysis is going to match what is going to happen at the site.
Thank you.
Yes, and I do want to mention that every single memo that we receive from INAT, every single email we receive from INAT, we do read through them, we consider them, we do not ignore them whatsoever. It just so happens that I disagree with the INAT's traffic consultant on the use of the analogy method.
Okay, thank you. I think, without the risk of speaking for the entire board, they're going to have their turn. But the main issue is, as you said, if we go with the 50-50, if we're planning on going with 50-50 as a board, and the only question is to make sure that that happens. And so we were talking about various permit conditions, because there will be a permit involved, to ensure in some way that whatever the mitigations are, that they actually happen and things go as they're supposed to go. And he mentioned that there's two ways on, you're already looking at the timing of traffic lights, and there already is some mention of staggering. He mentioned reduction of the school population. So at 50-50, you would need to do both or one or the other, more staggering or less students. Because I don't think you, unless I'm wrong, you didn't do 50-50 mitigation yet.
Yeah, we haven't done the actual mitigation yet, but we believe that there's some combination of staggering and student reduction.
So we'll be anxious
But
to.
we will be looking at
anxious to see that. And like I said, at the risk of, and I think most of us agree without, that we've seen enough of our consultants. Like I said, she doesn't have a horse in the race, so that's the deciding factor in my mind anyway. In terms of something, nothing's going to be perfect, but it's as good as we're going to get with the numbers that we have. And the big concern is to make sure that whatever the mitigation is, that it actually happens and it's practical. If you come up with a mitigation that's not practical, we're going to question.
Caesar, can I just add one thing to that? That not only that the mitigations happen, but that in fact the distribution is correct.
Yeah.
So that's a little different, to make sure the mitigation's happy, make sure the timing is right. But if it turns out, and we'll have to figure out some way to do this and to make it a condition of the permit, if it turns out that the
distribution
traffic pattern is different and that they're at certain intersections not meeting the standards in the code, it'll have to get corrected one way or another. So it's not just to make sure the mitigation measures that, but to make sure that the mitigation measures work.
Yeah, from what I understand from Elaine, is that any different split of 50-50 favoring the north will work with the mitigation plans for 50-50. So if it turns out it's 60-40, we're not making a mistake, because the mitigation at 50-50 is satisfactory for anything with a northern emphasis. Whether it's 51, 49, or anything to the north, the mitigation for 50-50 will account for, right?
Yes, that's correct based on my assessment of the applicant's traffic reports. So as is, they have fully mitigated the 60-40 scenario. There's not a lot you can do beyond that besides moving the students. Like, you've already maxed out what you can do with the traffic signal. So the next measure is adjusting the students in terms of their arrivals and also potentially reducing the student population. Therefore, with those measures in place, plus even reduced students, if it does end up being 60-40, it still meets, it would still meet your impact criteria. And likewise for 70-30, because 70-30 has fewer mitigation measures. But Carlito, maybe you can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong.
The other thing I thought we need to emphasize is that if we go with a south emphasis, 35-65, you mentioned that that's ignoring the north.
Yes, that's correct.
Could you be more specific?
So a 35-65 split means you have more vehicles on the southern side of the site as opposed to the northern side, which is what had been previously analyzed with 60-30 with, 70-30 and 60-40. And so with, if you favor it more to the south in terms of the trip distribution, what ends up happening is you're experiencing more impacts to the south, you're mitigating only those intersections as opposed to mitigating the intersections to the north. So it's a different set of mitigation measures. And if it ends up being 50-50 instead of 35-65, you're again not satisfying the impact criteria for the village. So again, 50-50 is the safest place to be. And with the post-implementation study, if you do find that the mitigation measures are not sufficient, you can potentially introduce more mitigation measures, more signal timing changes if it's favoring the south.
Okay, let me ask the board for comment.
Okay.
Laura.
So I want to say that I do agree with the 50-50 as an area to move forward with. I also want to say that I think the planning board has been extremely thoughtful over the months and months of process for this applicant. That the applicant has been thoughtful and respectful and submitted various, reports and things that we've requested. And that the community has really spoken and shared with us what their thoughts are. But just because people cut and paste a template doesn't, to submit to the planning board, doesn't make the community effort any less real. So I appreciate every letter and every person that's come every single month. I also want to state that while I am not someone who receives notice of this application because I'm not in the exact zone, I will also be deeply affected by this traffic or potential traffic. So I really consider that important. I appreciate that that Mr. Varma and his team and Carlito suggested that they can figure out a way to reduce the student population in order to help with this, and also stagger drop-off times, because it's really the morning part that will probably have the greatest impact. And I believe that with the correct mitigations, the correct permitting, and the correct attention to this ongoing, we can come up with an opportunity for Mr. Varma and his team to create something that can actually work for this community with the hopefully the least amount of impact. And as Marianne suggested, if the impact is greater than expected, we can go back and there will be, legal ramifications that the Primrose School will have to adhere to in order to make the corrections. I personally, as a member of this planning board, would like to see us resolve the traffic issue so that this application can move in one direction or another. And just to confirm, I do agree with this.
I do agree with the help of Elaine that the 50-50 seemingly is a conservative and a reasonable approach. I do feel for the local residents of the nearby area, having looked at 140 North Broadway, that it's a very difficult area, but living in the village itself, obviously traffic is very difficult, tough issue for all of us. And our decisions certainly would impact the entire village, much less neighboring communities as well. So again, the mitigation has to be addressed. And seemingly we have to be on top of that and certainly get input from our experts.
Yeah, I want to also, Lori said that, you know, even though we may have a different opinion than traffic studies produced by our local citizens, I mean, it was tremendous effort on their part. And if nothing else, it made our consultant think harder about what we're doing here. Not just come up with their own conclusions without somebody pecking holes at it or coming up with, make them think harder on, well, I mean, you know, I remember reading some book somewhere, two guys were having an argument. Finally, one of the two participants said, geez, I wonder if the other guy is right. So it's good. And it's a good thing to happen when you think maybe the other guy is right. I have to reevaluate what I'm doing. Actually, it was Joshua Chamberlain in his Bowdoin College days. Anyway, so thank you for the citizens producing what they did. And again, it's going to get down to the mitigation. And how do we make sure it's monitored? And well, Mary Ann will work on the permit also. Thank you. Mike Smith.
So I agree that the 50/50 is the planning tool. Because all we're doing is planning for the mitigation. We're not opining that this is actually going to be your actual breakdown of where your students are coming from. We're trying to plan for this development in this location. So the impact on traffic has to be determined, and we're using the 50/50 as that tool. However, I think that any complaints about, we are working with the zoning as it's given to us. And the zoning that's given to us is to measure the impact on traffic numerically. And part of the zoning code allows for a school to be on this site. If you think that a school ought not be on the site, or if you think that the impact on the village ought to be assessed differently, then I think that you ought to direct your attention to the Board of Trustees and make those arguments that perhaps they didn't consider a school on this site. Perhaps it ought not be as numerically or statistically, the impact ought not be as numerically or statistically based as it is. We recognize that the traffic signaling mitigation measures will exist. Once they're taken, they will exist. We also recognize that any other mitigation measures have to be enforceable. As everyone has said, we'll have to come up with a means to do that, whether that's annually or semi-annually. There'll be a change in your enrollment. There will be a change in the traffic impact, perhaps from year to year. And we may have to try to assess it. But I think for us right now, given the way the zoning is written, that we need to move forward with some sort of planning device. 50/50 is that device. But I think if you don't think that the community was heard on whether or not there ought to be this project on this site, I think you ought to direct it to the Board of Trustees. Bear in mind that whatever is done here is going to affect any other development on the abutting property to 76 North Broadway. It could limit it because we may be, quote unquote, using up all of the traffic that may be allowable. I don't know whether that would be important to the Board of Trustees or not.
Yeah, there was another thought before I get to Mike LaFuco. I was, it was an interesting point that less than 50/50, maybe 35/65, actually could be worse because, as Elaine said, everything to the north is not part of the mitigation, and that could be a bigger problem ignoring the north by emphasizing on the south. So the 50-50, it does address that. Okay, Mike, before.
I did have one other question,
Next.
and I'm hoping that anybody who comes up to the mic will address this. And the JCC numbers are simply a data point for me. They're not the be all and the end all, but they give us some sense of what to do. But the JCC numbers are that their students are coming from south of Strawberry Lane. There were 43 in what was called Zone B. And then there were only another 3 students perhaps in Hartsdale. So I looked at it and I only saw then 46 students coming from the south. And so I'm wondering if somebody else sees it differently in order to support the idea that 65% of the JCC students are coming from the south.
Yeah, I think that 50-50 split is our best option to move forward to look at how we're going to mitigate, since the majority of the mitigation will now be done with alterations or changes to the number of students and the drop-off times. Whether or not they can do that, how they're going to do that, I think is probably the most important issue. And so we need to get there. And I think what we've determined is using 50-50 is probably the best place to start with that. And as Elaine pointed out, using a more solidly weighted split would potentially do mitigation, force us to mitigate it incorrectly, but could also be, it isn't necessarily harder to mitigate just because we make it more solidly weighted.
Correct.
So we're looking for the right, not looking to get it as hard as possible. And the mitigation, the type of mitigation measures, I think are the most important topic in how we're going to ensure that year to year things don't change so drastically. And if they do change, that we have some measure to correct them within a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you, Mike. Before I open to the public, you've heard the board speak. You have anything to add?
I just wanted to point out, as I'm sure you know, that we're not just before this board for site plan approval, we're also before this board for a special permit.
Yes.
So there's a lot of oversight that comes with the special permit that makes, ensuring that the mitigation measures are actually implemented, and that's the enforcement mechanism.
We had quite a discussion about what we can do with it.
And we are also proposing with the post-implementation study that if in fact it does support what we have contended to be the traffic distribution, this board can then lift those staggering restrictions or population reduction restrictions. So that's what we are in favor of, having that post-implementation study to study the actual conditions.
Because as we said, the 50-50 split mitigation for 50-50 would meet any northerly weighted distribution. So there'll be opportunity to back off on something. You all said.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. We have anything on Zoom, Sarah?
Yes, there's somebody with their hand raised, Earl. Oh, actually, no, there's two.
Before we do that, Mary Ann and Elaine, you have anything to add?
Hello.
Nothing to add.
Hi.
All right, go ahead.
Hi. It's Earl Ferguson. I just had a question.
I think you have to state your address.
I live in Irvington at 14 South Ferris Street. And this is just a comment about from a resident who really does have to experience the traffic conditions on Route 9. But my question is simply, wasn't there a study, I think it might have been done by the state, about improvements to the Route 9 corridor from Hastings to Sleepy Hollow? And I'm wondering if I'm sure I don't have that exactly correct, but there was a Route 9 study, or it is in process. Does the planning board consider that criteria in terms of their decisions about this application?
Earl, Mike and I went to the presentation that DOT made at Mercy College a while back. And we discovered that part of the presentation was that between Main Street and Sunnyside, it's a single lane in each direction with the roundabouts at Sunnyside and Main Street. I'm not sure our village can go along with that plan. I think they're using their influence that's not a go in the village. But in addition to that, that's so far in the future. Current funding and the planning is still way off, and with the federal funding in disarray, it's just not something that fits the mix. Elaine, you want to?
Okay, so would decision?
Hold on a second, or let Elaine.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the Route 9 study, Complete Streets, is in a very early phase. It's in its initial design stages. So there's still a great possibility that the design could change, as Caesar had referred to. In addition to that, the applicant did run a sensitivity analysis showing the potential changes. And I believe the largest impact was the site's driveway would back up into the site. But it didn't seem that the intersections would be greatly impacted, especially because they would be roundabouts. In addition to that, the DOT does have the traffic study, the traffic volumes. They have incorporated it as part of their traffic study for Route 9.
Yeah, so we're not blind to the DOT. Maybe will happen.
All right, I was just wondering whether the decisions that we make now around this application would foreclose on some, more beneficial plan in the future, especially with the applicant's proposals about mitigation and left turns and striping and that kind of thing, and considering potential bicycle paths and that kind of future plan that might be beneficial. Are we foreclosing on that in terms of approving this particular application? It's just a question.
Thank you for the question, but I think we adequately looked at it.
If anything, if they're adding bike lanes and sidewalks and more transportation opportunities on Broadway, it could also mean that more parents would be choosing to walk or bike their children to the school as opposed to drive. So that could be a positive. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
Okay, thank you, Earl.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else on Zoom?
Yes. Paul Kirby.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Paul Kirby, 85 North Broadway. Thanks for your time this evening. I'm mostly going to read from the letter I wrote, but if I could just say I'm disappointed in not being able to have a say on the JCC study, the revised study, before making a determination. I live across the street. This is going to have an effect on me. And I think that study, taking the population of the JCC and applying it to the proposed site for the Primrose School, it defies common sense in some ways. So I'll address that, but I think I'm very disappointed in that. So to read from my letter. So by taking the student body of the JCC and applying it to a location over a mile to the south, the proposed location of the Primrose School, all of the people that live closest to the JCC will be included in the North Trip distribution. As a parent of a young children, I can tell you that proximity matters. So if you can think back to that West Orange Primrose diagram that they brought in, and there was a huge cluster of people around the school, of students around the school. Then you go out uh, 1 mile radius, 2 mile radius, there's still students, but less and less. But there's the biggest clusters around the school. So by the way this was analyzed, you're taking the people that live closest to the school that are most likely to attend, and you're assigning them all to the north trip distribution. Yeah, I mean, I don't have to read the rest, but I mean, that's my point. If you look at Phillipsburg Manor, which is at the top, I don't know if you have the map up, either the one from the JCC or the one from the AKRF memo, but on the outskirts of the perimeter of the north, you have Phillipsburg Manor, which is, bear with me a second while I find the numbers. 2 miles, it takes 2 miles to get to the JCC from that point, which is outside the perimeter. I'm in the north, which is approximately 6 to 14 minutes on a weekday at 8 a.m. according to Google Maps. If you take the southmost point, which is in the southern zone, it looks like there's a restaurant, which I think is Harvest on Hudson. That's 5.5 miles from the JCC, and that would take approximately 14 to 24 minutes at the same time on a weekday. So I have when we went to find our school for our preschool for our kids, we found the closest thing. We're extremely busy. A lot of our friends are extremely busy in the area. You want something close. And the way this is set up, you're including all of the people that live closest to the JCC in the north distribution. So none of those people are included as they would be coming from the south. I mean, am I wrong in my assumptions at all? Because
Caesar, may I speak on that?
yeah, please.
So to address the two items, firstly, we did not group everyone closest to the school as coming from the north. We looked at it very empirically. We drew a line that would clearly be Zone A definitely comes from the north, Zone B definitely comes from the south, and the JCC gave us the information on the numbers of students living in Zone A as well as Zone B. So again, we did not group anyone. This is all based on location data. This is all empirical. In terms of people coming from way outside the area, like I think you said Phillipsburg Manor. There's also 2 students coming from Briarcliff Manor, according to the JCC. In my calculations, I just omitted those. So anyone outside the 3-mile radius, outside zones A, B, and C, I just did not include them in my calculation. So with just Zone A, Zone B, and Zone C, we had 52 from the north and 48 from the south. So again, did not include anyone that far because, again, I agree with you. People would not realistically come from Phillipsburg Manor or Briarcliff Manor or White Plains even. So.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Is it possible to bring up the map? Because am I wrong in assuming that we're dealing with a population of students from the JCC, but we're bringing that down and saying when you draw the zones, the midpoint is the right across the street from me, the proposed site for the Primrose School. Is that correct?
Yeah, the line is essentially north of Strawberry Lane, close to where the driveway is, but it also separates certain neighborhoods that we know would come from the north, which is essentially on the map that is in the KRF memo, all of East Irvington, that would be coming from the north as opposed to the south.
Yeah, you need to remember what we emphasized, that anything that's more north than the 50-50 is already accommodated in the mitigation for 50-50. And anything more skewed coming from the south creates some issues that we may not want to deal with because the north intersections get adversely impacted if we wrongly assume there's more traffic from the south. So the 50-50, in addition to the analytical analysis of the JCC, has some validity of everything to the north is taken care of, and if you skew it to the south, there's some problems created at the north intersection. So
If I could, if I could just comment on both.
It's not the best world to skew the traffic flow from the south.
Yeah, and if I could just comment on both of those comments.
Please be brief because we have a room full of people who I'm sure would like to speak.
Okay, yeah, this is just very important to me and my family. In terms of, you didn't bring up that point though, when the applicant was gonna do 70-30, and if INAT didn't bring up that wasn't realistic, then that would have been the trip distribution. So it doesn't seem fair to bring that point up now. And that's to address that point. And then to address the JCC student population. So I'm saying that people that live closest to the JCC, to include everybody that lives closest to the JCC in the northbound distribution, because you're using the JCC JCC student population, is not a fair assessment, because a lot of those people, JCC is closer, they're just going to go there. You can't just juxtapose that down, because proximity matters, and you're including all the people that are closest to the JCC in the northbound distribution, which I think defies common sense and is not fair. But that's all. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kirby, this is Michael Smith. So let me just address a couple of things. First, when the applicant first presented 70-30, we continually pressed them on what their marketing data was for the 70-30. It had nothing to do with INAT's position, although it supported what we on the board were thinking, that we needed to see some data that supported the idea that it was 70-30. Right? Number one. Number two, INAT's the one who suggested that we look at the JCC as an analogy. That's the whole reason why we're looking at this. Third, as I said earlier, I don't look at their data as, you're looking at this too granularly. The way I look at the JCC info is pretty much 50% of their students come from the north of them and 50% of the students come from the south of them. That's the way I look at it.
If I could just comment, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because the letter to us said that Zone A was 46 and Zone B was 43. So we're just looking at it as a tool with which to go forward with planning.
Yeah, if I could just comment, it's not accurate to say that if you're using JCC as the point, that 50 come from the south and 50 come from the north. If you're using JCC and not falsely moving the point.
50%, Mr. Kirby, not 50.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I meant 50%. If you're using JCC as the point instead of moving it down to Strawberry Lane, what INAT showed 66% or whatever is coming from the north to the JCC.
Would it matter to you whether if everybody, we simply thought that everybody who was going to come to the school was from Irvington and that 50% were going to come from north of 76 North Broadway and 50% were going to come from south of 76
I don't think
North
that's,
Broadway, you'd have the same issue.
yeah, I mean, it's technical, but I don't.
This could go on all night, and we have other people to go.
Okay,
and,
yeah, fair enough.
And even if you know you're missing a critical point, and you're overlooking the point that anything skewed to the north, that's not 50-50. If it's 51 or 70-30 or 60-40, the mitigation that would be planned for 50-50 addresses any skewed population coming from the north. And you heard our traffic consultant say that if you skew the traffic to the south, 35-65, that we create problems at the intersections to the north. So
just one
either
last
way,
thing.
either way, the north skewing is accounted for because it works, and the south is not a good idea because you create problems to the north. So we're going to move on. Thank you for your interest. And Sarah,
can I just respond to that?
I'm sorry, we have to move on. Sarah, do we have another comment? Anybody in person?
Good evening, Steve Maffia. Excuse me. Wrong. Representing INET. Tonight I wanted to talk about the issues with trip distribution. Maybe later. Thank you. Basically, there are three different methodologies to determine a trip distribution for a particular site. Doesn't have to necessarily be a preschool, it could be any site, residential, retail, whatever. The first methodology that's in the industry standard ITE trip generation or trip study manual talks about using current volume flows on the particular street. To make this make sense more than just the hypotheticals, let's say we're talking about Broadway in Irvington. If you wanted to use the volume methodology, you'd find the volumes along Broadway and find out what the distribution is, what the flows are north, south, and any significant turning movements at main intersections like Main Street and Harriman and Clinton and so on throughout the corridor. You would look to get as much of that volume together as you can. And you wouldn't just specifically look at one intersection during one time period, which is what the applicant did. You would want to use all of the intersections along Broadway, all of the turning movements, and all of the time frames, AM, midday, and PM, which is what we did at INET. In terms of the total volumes, the volumes that we used in our analysis for the traffic flow analysis far exceed the volumes that they used in their single intersection, single time period analysis. Secondly, that particular movement happens to be a very heavily turning movement volume towards the river, towards the train station off of Broadway, and not indicative of a lot of the other intersections along the Broadway corridor from Clinton all the way up to Sunnyside. The second methodology is called the gravity model. That's what was also attempted here to do a 5 mile and a 3 mile radius, looking for population data to say this is where they'd come from, using various routes. I think that was inconclusive at best. The last methodology is called the analogy method. That's what was used in what we're talking about here tonight. The analogy methodology basically says, according to the ITE the IT manual, the analogy methodology, I'm quoting from it, uses existing trip patterns from similar developments near the proposed site. Traffic generated at the project's entrances, that's the proposed in this case would be Primrose, is distributed based on the directional split of current traffic on the roadways and nearby similar developments. Two very important words, similar and nearby. When we did our initial evaluation of trip distribution, we thought the analogy method, still do think the analogy methodology is the best approach. We found that there is an existing preschool at the Good Shepherd site, which is only 1,000 or so feet south of the Primrose site. We also later and agreed with the board, and I believe the board's consultant, that the JCC school would also make a very good analogy sample as far as the analogy was concerned. We actually counted at the Good Shepherd School and found the distribution of their trips in the morning, in the afternoon, and late afternoon dismissal times to be distributed 34% to and from the north, 66% to and from the south. When we got a chance to look at the JCC information, the counts that were done at the driveway by DTS included, and I'm not sure if Elaine had this right, she said that JCC is only preschool. JCC is not only a preschool, it is much more than that. It has other facilities that have traffic in it that have nothing to do with the who is actually going to the JCC preschool operation. So we
recognize that. In fact, Mike Bafuco brought that issue up.
Okay.
And
sorry, I
at
may
the
have
last meeting, I also mentioned that we should ignore those traffic counts outright. We cannot draw any conclusions from those counts.
Right. I just thought I heard you say that it was just only at preschool tonight. Anyway, the
99 students that are reflected in the information we just got is the preschool.
yes. And when we
So
looked at the
we're not-
preschool, looked at the preschool information and what we got from JCC, the assistant director, manager of the operation, was that about 61 or so of their students live in areas where the only route to the school is to come up Broadway from the south. And so that 60, along with some of the ones that live to the east, made about 64 of the students at the JCC coming to the site from the south, or about 64%.
Except about 7 to 9, I forget what number
Right,
Mr. Altamira used.
Right. And we
Was recognized as possibly coming from north of 76 North Broadway.
Right.
So that would reduce that 61 number down to perhaps 54.
No.
Oh, yes.
The 61 is without those.
61 number, just to be fair, the 61 number that was given to us last month was 61 south of the JCC, and we all recognize that included in that 61 number were students who lived somewhere between 76 North Broadway and the JCC. So that would be north of 76 North Broadway, but south of the JCC.
No.
I'm
sorry.
Another point that's important. Another point that's important. You're relying on your interpretation of the JCC data. We got our own raw data from the JCC, and it was evaluated by our professional raw data on a series of mappings that represented what the consultant wanted to see to come up with the conclusion that she came up with.
Right.
It was the raw data, not your interpretation of their data. Thank you.
Just to clarify that, we didn't interpret the data that JCC gave us. They gave us information that said 61 of their students that come from the south of the site can only reach the site by driving north on Broadway. And it didn't limit it to the area between 76 North Broadway and the JCC. It extended much farther south.
That's not what I said.
The way I understood it, you're saying
when the number of 61 was presented to us by Mr. Altamira at the last meeting, he allowed for the fact that there were 7 to 10, either 7 to 9, looking 9 to 10, 9 to 10 of those students who came from what you would call either Irvington or Tarrytown, south of the JCC. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. So what I'm saying is that the outside of that area, farther south in Irvington, down towards Dobbs Ferry, is the 61.
No, it's not. It's 43 according to the JCC. According to the letter from on June 24th.
Let me explain that.
It's
The area-
43
the area-
south of 76 North Broadway.
The areas that they used were the ones that Ms. Du put together and said, this is where we want to see where your students are.
I'm sure
And
she didn't make the mapping up out of thin air. She had a professional opinion as to why she made that map. Elaine?
What do you
And it
think?
was what the
Let's let
board
him- let's let
asked
him
for.
finish
It was what the board asked her to
Well, hold
find
on.
at the last
But
meeting.
we should hear from you. What is wrong with the mapping that we did? I'm mentioning what is wrong with
The mapping attempts to take the 99 students at JCC, find out where they're living, and decide that they are the students who are going to attend Primrose at 76 North Broadway, rather than using the applicable and industry standard methodology that says you do a count at the driveway to a comparable nearby development and simply take that result, that split, and apply it to the driveway of the proposed development. It doesn't
think
say anything at all. It doesn't say anything at all about whether or not you should find out what the residents are, the students' residents, where they're coming from, and then say, well, okay, that's what's going to be the distribution of this site, which is several miles to the south, or in a different location altogether. Let me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
We've discussed a lot of different methodologies. I don't think we can continue to say this methodology is wrong because I think this methodology is wrong. Without telling us more on why you think the one that we did isn't valid. All you did was say, this was the methodology. And I don't think that's right. Instead of using this other one. So based on your description of what we did, why is that not a valid methodology?
My methodology, it's not my methodology, it's not my personal.
I'm talking about ours. I need to
That
know why you don't
methodology,
agree with.
that methodology is different. It's unusual, it's unique to this situation. The methodology that's in the ITE Manual for Transportation Studies, page 475. I read the quote from it. It doesn't say anything about locating students' residences. When you do the analogy methodology, it doesn't say anything
Probably
about.
because they can't expect that you'll be able to get such incredibly accurate data from such a place near you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Mr. Maffia, respectfully. So in terms of the three types of methodologies to determine trip distribution split, we did try all of these. The ones that applied at least. Current volume flows, looking at the roadway volumes onto North Broadway. I believe you looked at them as well, and they resulted in roughly 50-50 a lot of the times. The analogy method, I believe, does not apply here for multiple reasons. Again, like I said before, your quote in your memo, which is directly from ITE, it needs to be from similar developments near the proposed site. This is not a similar development. This includes residential units, and I think 54, if I'm not mistaken, and that alone disqualifies us using JCC's split of 35, 65, or whatever it is, and directly applying it to the site. In addition to that, again, like I mentioned before, 287 right next to it skews a lot of the data. In addition to, it's a mile south. It's not nearby. So I can't use the analogy method, and I would not recommend using it. In terms of the gravity method, which you also mentioned, we did also look at that and looking at the populations, and that again was another data point. So having the results from the gravity method, which you had disagreed with and you had pushed us to do, more digging, more information, that resulted in, I believe, 68-32 or close to 65-35. That was one data point. The analogy method, 50-50, that was another, the analogy method we took out, but the current volume flows close to 50-50, that was another data point. And if all of these are inconclusive, we just need to use our best professional judgment, our engineering judgment. And in my opinion, that is looking at the potential student populations, which is what we did in terms of getting the JCC address data. And personally, I believe that having all three data points really point to having 50-50 as the most reasonable, conservative, worst case conservative analysis.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Having heard what Elaine had to say.
No, she's much better.
I respectfully disagree with the fact that the analogy method is applicable here because we have two existing preschools at the Good Shepherd School and also at the JCC. They're close enough, and they're similar in terms of the programs that they provide. They happen to be a little bit smaller in terms of the number of students that they. But that's sort of an absolute situation where really only what we're looking for is how many students are brought in from the south, go back and forth to the south, how many go back and forth to the north. And those and that's the reason why it's not important. It's not useful to find out where they live and then say, well, okay, that's the population that's going to go to 76 North Broadway. It's not. It's the population that goes to JCC. Population that goes to Primrose at 76 North Broadway is going to be a different world of students.
Are you saying that the JCC is or is not the proper subject of the analogy method?
It is.
Okay. And so what information would you, how would you use the JCC information? You're talking about a trip count out?
To get,
is that what you're saying?
We could do count, that could be done, but that's not what we did. They did the count.
We discounted what they did. We discounted what they did.
But if we can get a count that has just the preschool numbers in it, that would also.
But it hasn't been done yet.
It has not been done.
Right, so what we have is the JCC is a proper subject of analogy. We have information before us, which we have used by analogy, which we have interpreted. And Elaine has interpreted as meaning that a 50-50 split is a proper way to go for planning. If you have other information on the J and how to get it, then you should do that.
Well, I don't have the information, but how to get it would be to count and figure out what portion of the traffic that's entering and exiting the site, the JCC site, is associated with the preschool, and use that as an analogy, methodology. That basically what Elaine set up was another gravity model by doing the circle and the different zones and.
She just said she didn't use gravity.
We just,
Well, no, I'm saying basically what you did by asking JCC for the addresses of students in 3 different zones that she drew kind of arbitrarily, I think. You know, that's a gravity model. It's not an
Well,
analogy.
and I respect your opinion, but this is our consultant. She does, as I said, she doesn't have a horse in the race.
Believe
So
me,
she's
it's
our
true. I don't
consultant.
have a horse in this race either.
Oh, yes, you do.
What's the horse? What's the horse?
Your client, in case you didn't understand.
I have I've
Let
actually.
me finish this. And just like Mr. Kirby, you're ignoring the demonstration that Elaine gave. If we're wrong to and the north is right, 50-50 split mitigation addresses anything that we're wrong about going to the north. And if we're wrong about the south, and we're creating problems that we don't want to create at the intersections to the north. So the 50-50, in addition to having some numerical numbers, as an engineer, I like numerical numbers. Say 50-50 is as close as we can get. There's some logical reasons for the 50-50 because you're accounting for being wrong to the south or being wrong to the north. So, 50-50 in my mind is a combination of number game and some logic of what happens if you're wrong.
What would be wrong with using a 35-65 as a worst case?
She already explained that. Can you explain it again for the gentleman?
40-60? No, that's.
She explained that.
I understood that. And
Did
what I'm
you
saying is,
understand it?
yeah, but
Good.
But it's not the point that I'm trying to make. If in fact you're looking for a worst case scenario, why not 35-65 or 40-60?
She explained it.
South. And remember
Okay,
what
that's your point. Could you explain that again, please?
So with a 35-65 or anything skewed more to the south, what you're doing is you're ignoring the potential impacts to the north. The reason why I would not recommend 35-65 is it's simply not realistic. All the data points we have, all the valid data points we have for trip distribution point to 50-50 or something skewed more to the north. Something skewed more to the south, again, like I said, you would be mitigating the intersections to the south, but you would then be ignoring more of the intersections to the north, which there are a lot of critical intersections there that we don't want impacts at. So
Well, I understand the point, but if I remember the map in Irvington correctly, there's one major intersection north of the site at Sunnyside. All the rest of the intersections, Strawberry, Fargo, Riverview, Heritage Hills, Main Street, Harriman Station, Clinton, all south of the site. Aren't you not accounting for the worst case scenario of those vast majority of intersections in Irvington by trying to skew more traffic away from it, which, just doesn't make sense to me. If we followed what they had originally, it was a 70-30 north-south split. Simply ignoring all of those intersections to the south with 30. In fact, Elaine even came up at one time and said that you don't need to do intersections south of Main Street because there's such a small amount of traffic being distributed to the south if you believe the 70-30, which we never did from the get-go.
Neither did this board, by the way, from the get-go.
I appreciate that.
I think there's a difference here. You're saying worst case, Elaine is saying worst case combined with most
reasonable
probable,
worst case.
right? So
But again, I asked the question, why not 40/60? I don't want to belabor it. I'm just like making that point, and you don't have to.
And she already re-explained it.
I understand.
So if you have further,
I do. Okay, any further analysis, whatever the board decides on, obviously. The trip generation basically has to be based on the ITE trip estimated number of trips for the 180 student daycare center distributed according to whatever the distribution pattern the board decides on. According to the proper methodology, distribution of children should not be based on anything but the analogy method. And if we were to do the analogy method, it would be basically to identify similar development, do the turning movement counts at the driveway, apply that directional split, 1, 2, 3, simple as that. We would not do the actual residences of the children and hypothetically treat that group as the students going to the new school. Wanted to give you an example to maybe clarify that a little bit more. What if the development was a small professional office building on Broadway, another site? And I wanted to use the analogy method. I'd find a similar office nearby, do the count at their driveway, and apply it to that particular location. I wouldn't try to identify the workers or the visitors at that particular office building. I just simply use the trip split at the driveway to the existing use. It seems that there's still some misrepresentation or misinterpretation of what we were doing and what we were doing from the beginning as we analyzed and reviewed the documents that were being submitted. We did not use the Toll Brothers study from previous years. Toll basically used the AKRF 2023 existing conditions analysis that they did back in 2023. Again, as far as the intersections are concerned, we think that intersection south of Main Street, as more and more traffic is sort of decided upon as being traffic that goes to and from the south from the site. Certainly intersections south of Main Street should be included in any future studies, whatever the distribution is that you decide on. Finally, well, there were a couple of other things that that we mentioned tonight that I just want to touch on. In attachment A of the traffic study that was in the June submission from the applicant, in attachment A said that that there was mitigation at the intersection of Main Street, and that mitigation was to add a second left turn lane. It seems that has now disappeared, or apparently it has, but it was in that study in attachment A. Such an improvement would be impossible to do because there's not enough pavement on Main Street. You need a second turn lane, second lane on Broadway north of the intersection to accept the two lane left turn. Attachment B summarizes hourly trip generations and understates the trip generation from ITE on a daily basis for 180 student preschool by almost 240 trips. We'd like to know where those other trips are being made, when, because they've talked about changing the pickup times, drop off and pickup times by making them earlier in the day, both in the morning and in the afternoon, and it doesn't show up in the afternoon, and we don't know how much additional trips were made before 9 o'clock. Finally, I just philosophically, again, you would allow me, in my 40 years plus experience in traffic engineering, I found that just because an applicant submits information requested by any board doesn't necessarily mean that the applicant has submitted the full correct information. the information has to be carefully examined to ensure that it answers the board's questions and was developed in good faith using the appropriate standards. Not something sort of made up or found to be maybe workable in a particular situation. This has been my assignment for INAT, and I assume it's AKRS task for you as well. So that's all I have to say tonight.
Well, thank you very much. There's a lot of analytics. Before, oh, you want a question?
Yeah.
Right, and then Elaine has to speak.
So on the whatever data there was from the Good Shepherd School, was there a count done people entering? Because the count of people leaving, they can be going in any number of directions because they're running errands, doing different things. The count of people entering is to me the best indicator of whether they're coming from the south or they're coming from the north. So do you have, I don't recall.
Yes, we do. We have the entering and exiting.
I'm only interested in entering.
Entering was 34% to and from the north, 66% to and from the south. And it was similar in the exiting. It tended to go in the same direction.
There were several reasons, demographic differences, and Elaine can go through it. And Elaine,
Speak up in the microphone, please.
He keeps mentioning this other methodology which used several times, that it's not applicable. What was the name of that?
The analogy method.
And you indicated a couple of times that it's not, in your profession, that it's not applicable here. Yeah. That's all. And there were some other things I know you addressed in this one.
So first talking about just going in order, Good Shepherd, again, it's not a similar site. It's a much smaller daycare facility. It's got fewer students, a different age group, different hours, so we can't really compare it. It's not apples to apples. So that I can't pull any information from that. In terms of the analogy method, again, we are still if we go by what Mr. Maffia is saying, we are ignoring the fact that there is residential on the site. So using Mr. Maffia's, I guess, analogy, it's like saying I've got the site that I'm comparing it to is an office building, but the site that I want the trip distribution for is an office building and 20 residential units. It's not comparable. We can't pull information from that. Again, we can't use the analogy method because the land uses are different. We're ignoring the 50 plus residential units that are proposed by Varma. We're also ignoring the fact that it is by 287. It's very far. It's far enough from the 76 North Broadway site that we need to discount it. In terms of the Main Street left turn lane, that's a typo from the applicant. Instead of adding a left turn lane, it's extending the left turn lane. And there is space on Main Street such that you can extend the turn lane without affecting travel lanes, without affecting parking. So I don't see any issues with the mitigation that's being proposed.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, just a quick response, if I may. Thank you,
Go
I
ahead.
appreciate that. There really isn't enough room in the block between Broadway and Dearman Street for any kind of significant or usable extension of the left turn lane on Main Street, first of all. Secondly, if
I think we disagree with that, but go ahead.
Secondly, I appreciate that it was a typo, but it didn't sound like it was a typo. It sounded like I was being accused of making something up instead by the applicant's traffic engineer. Also, if it's not an analogy methodology, you certainly can apply the analogy to the preschool component of the Varma site. You don't have to apply it to the entire site. I'm not saying that we should ignore the 50 residential units, but certainly you make it. There was a distinction between the trips made by the school, by the preschool, and the trips made by the 50 residential units. Those are different numbers, and they're probably in their model as different numbers. So apply the distribution separately, because you have the preschool data from the analogy methods at Good Shepherd and JCC. It would be a simple process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yes.
Elaine, anything further to say? Yeah, go ahead.
Blaine, is there anything about the existing traffic or anything else that makes it harder to mitigate a southern weighted traffic distribution versus northern, especially considering that most of the mitigation now is going to be around changes to student population, now that drop offs and timing. It seems like seem to be very heavily focused on the assumption that the more southern weighted it is, the harder it will be, where I don't know that that's necessarily true. And so if it's more, the mitigation will be different, not harder. I think
It won't necessarily be harder. I think you'll have impacts at different intersections that we have not considered, but at those intersections, there may be enough room in the signal timing to adjust it and then mitigate those impacts. So I don't believe it would be harder, but I still believe.
so. We're more talking about what we're going into year one with in terms of mitigations, which would then get immediately reviewed and potentially changed if it's not working to meet the code, not the split. Right? Because we're going to what the code wants in terms of traffic, not to split that we decide to initiate mitigation.
Yeah, so in a post-implementation study, you would analyze each intersection and determine if it still meets the code requirements. If it does not, it's additional mitigation measures that need to be implemented, whether that's new adjustments to the student population or just additional signal timing changes on the south side.
I think that was good.
Yeah, just wanted the point.
You should make the point.
The point is that I think there seems to be the assumption that by waiting, having them start with a more heavily southerly weighted trip distribution, all of a sudden this isn't going to happen. Which, especially given the types of mitigations that they're considering, I think it just changes the mitigations, not changes the project. And so I think focusing on the mitigations is more important because we want to get the right and make sure that they can be enforced and that there won't be a traffic problem for the town.
Anybody else in the audience? The young lady that raised her hand. You look familiar.
Yeah, sorry, I'm every time boring, but I live
Maybe
across the
familiar,
street
but
from
you have
that.
to identify yourself.
Yes, still, I know. Natalia Broida, 93 North Broadway. Just wanted to mention, I'm not arguing whatever distribution, whatever it is you say. But my point is, whatever distribution is, let's assume 50-50. Each one of those turns will have to go and drop off this imaginary child, right? So even if we divide in these 180 kids into 90, let's assume that they're going to be dropping off at like 7:30 and then at 8:30 or 90, whatever number you have. That means that these 80 cars will be lining into very, very, very tiny space. JCC and Little Shepherd School have fabulous parking lot, especially JCC. Now we're looking about a tiny space, basically size of this building, of their parking lot. How on earth they're going to be dropping off their children? How long each stop is going to be, and how far this line of cars waiting to drop off their precious child going to be? I think they should calculate each drop in reality, how long they're going to take, and how far the traffic. Sorry.
I think the internal traffic.
They have to calculate how long the driveway is and how many cars will fit there to drop child. And 6 months old is not going to be dropped off in 3 minutes.
I know. I think that was.
So that was one of our comments in terms of looking at queuing. So to clarify, it will not be 80 cars at once lining up to get into the site. It is, I think, 120 cars or maybe 80 cars during 1 hour. So that's maybe 2, maybe 3 cars in a minute. So again, not 80 at the same time. That would be a lot. So having 2 to 3 cars a minute, far more reasonable. In terms of the internal site queuing, I believe, again, if the applicant could correct me if I'm incorrect, I believe there's space for maybe 20 or so vehicles to queue. It's a very large area and they configured it so that it's relatively safe and easy to access for pickup and drop off. So I had no issues with that. But I did ask for an updated queuing analysis. I believe they did provide a plan showing the queuing space, but I'm just looking more for during the peak hour, how many cars will be queuing, what's their maximum anticipated queue. So.
And they probably can't answer that until they figure out the stagger.
Yeah, exactly. The staggering and maybe the potential reduction in students, but they'll need to update that information in the next
Queuing
session.
information based
Correct.
on mitigation.
That's correct.
Do you have something? I heard you.
No. They also talked about drop off, someone going into the garage and having spaces there for drop off.
Anybody else in the audience? Peter?
Hello, it's Peter McCallick from Strawberry Lane. Since we were just talking about mitigation, I was reminded of something I wrote in one of my emails. When we were doing the Good Shepherd traffic study in December, we noticed that at each pickup and drop off, there was a patrol officer from Irvington Police who would step out into the street and halt the traffic, not just going north to create an opening for people to exit left, but also to stop the traffic going south so people could go to the right as well. And I think I'm just wondering if something like that wouldn't that also be necessary for this project, given the larger amount of cars? And if so, would that halting of Broadway traffic, would that be figured traffic modeling itself since it's a slowdown?
I cannot speak for that. It would have to be the applicant's traffic engineer opining. If Carlito is still on the call.
You heard that, so I think they had some mitigation with turn lanes and
That's just extending turn lanes, but not at the driveway, at other locations. But in terms of the site here, and also police presence, that is up to the applicant's discretion.
Okay, and then just
did you get that question?
Yeah. So we ran level of service analysis on the driveway. It shows that it can operate efficiently without traffic control.
We'd like to see that, okay? Send it into Elaine.
Yep.
Thank you. And then I just wanted to point out that, you know what, I think Paul Kirby and Stephen, to some extent, were trying to put their finger on something and it wasn't getting across. And maybe against my better judgment, I'm going to try to do the same thing, not to change anybody's mind. I just want to, I think, just play interpreter for a second. And if you don't mind, I just have a couple of stray maps here that might be helpful. Do you mind? Yeah.
Make sure our consultant.
Oh.
I already have the maps. I think it's the same.
It's just actually a slightly different map, but it's. You have one for the applicant? This is completely ad hoc. We'll give them one. We'll get you one. Yeah, but I think the point was about what's funny about when you move the JCC has 3 mile radius, or it has a radius. And now you are moving that center of that radius down the street by 1.5 miles. So when you look at that map, 1.5 miles is actually, it looks like quite a lot, right? That is basically a quarter of the entire diameter of the radius of the circle that we've drawn here. So when you're moving the center of the radius, you are also moving the center of gravity for this new market that we're modeling in Irvington. So imagine that I'm a JCC client, and right now I live north of the JCC, a mile and a half north of it. So I'm at that border between Tarrytown and Sleepy Hollow. So with that, if the site gets moved a mile and a half south, and I'm now suddenly 3 miles away from something that was closer. So I think everyone agrees I'm now a little bit less likely to go to the JCC, that new site, because it's that much farther away. On the other side, you have somebody who's, let's say, at the Hastings border with Dobbs Ferry. They are right now 4.5 miles away from the JCC. So they're very unlikely, you would say, to be JCC customers, right? But you move that south down a mile and a half, and maybe your analysis changes. Now it's just 3 miles, right? And so just that basic logic that the closer you are to something, the more likely you are going to be to go to it, that has shifted. But right now, anyway, as I understand it, that guy who's at the very tip of the 3 mile radius, he's being counted as just as likely to go to the new site in Tarrytown as he was when he's going to the current JCC site in Tarrytown. I hope you understood what I mean.
I fully understand what you're
So it's just basically what is that a realistic model for these?
What's being overlooked is this is not a permanent model. This is something that we're using right now to move forward in order to plan for mitigation measures, which if the project is built, I'm saying if the project is built, there will be a reevaluation periodically. It could be semi-annually, it could be annually.
Totally on board.
Mike's point is that within a year, if it's evaluated and it turns out that you're right, that it's, instead of it being 50-50, it was 60 from the south and 40 from the north, we would have a measurable impact on traffic, and additional mitigation measures or different mitigation measures would have to take place.
Sure.
It doesn't, whatever project is there is the result of the Board of Trustees deciding that a project can be built there. And so we only have limited tools with which to address the traffic, because the code says you measure it numerically with mitigation measures. And so I understand exactly what you're saying. And we're just trying to be prudent, but recognizing, and the applicant will have to recognize that if you're right after a year or 2 years or 3 years, if you're right, because that's how their enrollment is changing, then they're going to have to take other mitigation measures.
I'm neither right or wrong. I don't have a horse here either.
Let me further on that. And Mike Lofuco started to say about probability. And, I'm, in addition to the academic and the numbers, I've also mentioned that, if it's wrong and the north is predominant, the mitigation at 50-50 addresses that. I mean, anything to the north skew will work because 50-50 will address it. And Elaine explained some negative things if the 50-50 is incorrect and it's 45, 65, 55. That there's some issues with some negative things that might happen. And so there's a combination of two things to weigh. And you wind up with the middle of between the academics and the good that will happen if it's wrong to the north, and the bad that might happen if it's wrong to the south. So I'm pretty comfortable.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I think I respect the logic. I can see the logic, and I just wanted to really genuinely play interpreter there, because I thought.
Yeah, because it was a good point, because I brought it up 6 months ago.
Okay.
About the person at the extremity
Right.
Of the perimeter is less likely than the person that's across the street.
Last thing is, I don't think I heard this, but I think it was mentioned in the Stephen Mafia memo. There was a suggestion originally from you, Chairman Freddie, about possibly adding Harriman Station to the list of intersections. This is August last year. You thought that.
Elaine, did we do that?
Yeah. If I could just and at the time we talked about it in October, and Elaine, Ms. Du rightly noted that at a 70-30 split, that just didn't really make sense because the likelihood of that getting that hot with such a north-heavy split didn't justify taking a look at it. But if we are going to be doing 50-50 now, that argument sort of falls away. And so I just thought maybe, again, in an abundance of caution, it should be added. Again, especially because I think your initial concern, sir, was about the development at 3040 South Broadway.
Yes. Elaine, did we look at Harriman or could we?
I'm trying to take a look, but I don't believe we did. I don't believe the applicant's traffic engineer did. Not at
Is it worth looking at, given the 50-50?
We do. There are traffic counts there, so you could potentially look at it. The vehicles will primarily be going through, but Carlito, is that something that could be added to the analysis?
That was a question.
Carlito, you still awake?
I'm still here.
How are the Yankees doing?
I'm a Met fan, so we split the doubleheader. So you're talking about Harriman Road?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's gonna change the findings ultimately, because by the time your traffic's getting down to there, it will dissipate a little, but I think in the interest of moving things along, if that's something that the board has interest in seeing and we have the data, we could run that analysis in the 50-50.
And there's an interest provided, and we have a mutual interest in making sure.
Yeah.
Since we're going with 50-50, there may be another element to further justify our settling on this number. Okay.
Yep.
Just to clarify, I think in the AKR study, as I recall, they treat it as one intersection, so Harriman and Station, even though they're a little.
They're a little.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else? Did anybody come back on Zoom? Mary Ann, Elaine? Catherine? Mr. Varmer?
Well, I'd like to applaud the village board and the residents for taking this process of determining the trip generation, trip distribution process. I must say that this was one of the most thoughtful and thorough evaluation that I have experienced in the states that I have done development in. Though we still believe 70-30 is the correct distribution, we are willing to understand.
I applaud your tenacity.
We are willing to adopt mitigation and understanding that this is the best path forward, because we are at the end of the day a community serving entity, and we want to be with the community for a long term. We are willing to adopt things that will appease the board and the residents. I'd like to commend the Board of Trustees and the Village Board for having the vision to adopt the change that they envisioned for the community progress. Every school, park, road, and home in Irvington exists because at one time a change was proposed, and the community had a vision to embrace it. If our ancestors had stopped the change to protect character of time, none of them today would exist. So, and one of the other points to Mr. Kirby and other residents, in relations to the traffic flow, let's not forget, if we do have a established educational facility and residential ability within the community, that will be lesser people commuting to other locations. That will be lesser vehicles on the road as well, alongside the traffic that is going in different directions.
Yeah, just like they have in terms of traffic, we're looking for the sidewalk so that the residents that live there walk to the station, so driving to the station.
Noted.
A sidewalk and also a crossing.
We've got
We got a lot to
long
do.
way to
We have a
go.
lot to go on the site, and Ed, he's not here now, but Ed has indicated that progress is being made on site plan. So we're not gonna do that here because the state's, we're gonna keep the year at it almost 2 hours. And I think that progress is moving along. The fire truck thing is still, needs to be looked at. Keep working at the site. Site thing. Because we still have to do site capacity. The reason we didn't do it, there's a lot of issues that have to get settled before we.
And there are also other issues,
Yeah, there's a lot of
like the
issues.
police and whatever, but like we said, we weren't gonna go any farther with that until this is resolved. It's still not resolved. We're at 50-50. You've still gotta come back and show mitigation that works.
So going forward for the next meeting, will you be prepared to present the plans to the board, the updated plan?
So on traffic. We're not doing the site plan next time.
Yeah, I think we have to be satisfied that the mitigation's gonna work, so I think that's probably what the next meeting.
But you can do that off-site. Ed has been willing, I think, to.
He actually worked with Mr. Gato this week.
Right, so, I mean, a lot of course, we'll present proposed mitigations to the board, but a lot of it could be worked out in the interim. The technical data to ensure that between the consultants about the proposed mitigation with the staggering. and-
Well, what we could do at the next meeting is, if they're satisfied that the mitigation will work, is start, maybe spell out, we still wanna see this, we still wanna see this, we still wanna see this. Yeah, because a lot of them are engineering issues, but some are other issues, like we haven't gotten, they haven't gone to the police department to ask the police department, do you think there's gonna be any?
So we have sent out the plans to the police and the
Well, we
fire.
haven't gotten an answer,
Yeah.
so anyway, I think that might be helpful at the next meeting to summarize for them or list for them what outstanding issues there are in addition to the site plan issue.
The planting plan will be a big deal.
Okay, the landscape plan.
With what's there is clearly marked and what's planned clearly marked. And take into account, because it's gonna be pertinent, that the planting plan and the stormwater plan, which is highly critical at that location, stormwater plan. The stormwater facilities and the planting plan have to be compatible. Can't be planting trees where there's going to be a stormwater retention system, distribution system. And I think in one of your earlier plans did that. The stormwater disposal system was down by the stone fence where you want to put the trees for screening. So, and you need to show that they're compatible on the same plan, that this is where the stormwater is going to go, and these are where the trees are gonna go, not on top of the stormwater.
So I know that the our engineer have been working, the plans have been updated, the civil site plan.
Well, to tell you the truth, they've been updated a half a dozen times, and I don't even look at them anymore, because they're gonna be updated again. But the stormwater is very important, because you have to contain the water. And connecting to the Route 9 stormwater system, that's at capacity, so that's a difficult alternative, so it needs to be on site. Have soil data that whatever subsurface system you put in is gonna actually accommodate the amount of water that roof and parking lot is gonna generate. it's a major issue because there's when it's a major storm, there's pipe at the corner of Strawberry and Broadway, 8-inch or so pipe that runs full. It causes flooding on Route 9. So there is a lot of water there now, and putting a big roof, you know, and a big parking lot, driveway. Hopefully, you have a plan that it doesn't exacerbate an existing waterfront.
Right.
That's a major component of stormwater after we finish traffic. Ed, is there any other big deal? I guess the height.
big deal.
The height.
No, if they can. If they're doing mitigation, if they're doing thing, and if they have time to recommend a testing methodology along next month.
Yeah.
For the.
Yeah, yeah, the, not only how what to mitigate, we know what the traffic light, as Mike said, you know, that's gonna work because people stop at red lights and go on green lights, but telling people to arrive at 9 instead of 9:30, that's not like a red light, green light situation. So come up with a monitoring program and that you would commit to make sure that people meet the staggered plan.
Something that can be tested by third party.
Yeah.
Might include some reports from them as well.
Yeah.
But
like Mercy College submits a traffic report every 6 months, I think, periodically.
Yeah, every 6 months.
Yeah.
6 months.
Methodology for the
That's correct.
post-implementation study.
Yeah.
And like Ed mentioned, the measures for how the mitigation measures will be implemented and enforced, right?
Yeah.
But
well, you need that first.
And then the scope.
And then the scope is to
Yeah.
prove that you're maintaining. I mean, you're gonna have to see that before you can move forward, because if you can't document what they did third party, it's hard to.
This is true. Okay.
Understood.
Thank you, everybody. Anthony, I miss your melodious voice.
You know, it was all said.
Thank you anyway. Like I said, the comments from the public, while we might disagree with some of them, they take into consideration, as I said, they caused our consultant to think about it and to reevaluate. As I said, when you're in a situation like this, you have to think maybe the other guy is right. So with that thought process of maybe the other guy is right, you have to make sure you're right. So I think our consultant has done that. We're pretty happy with it. So thank you very much.